causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low, the instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mists, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on the summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sunshine in the northwest, temperatures reaching the mid-20s for parts of western Scotland. Could be the warmest day of the year so far on Friday. And it's going to feel humid wherever you are, and that humidity continuing as we begin the weekend. Actually, plenty of fine weather at first on Saturday, further rain to come in the south on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon to you. Hope you're well. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. I'm Ben Leo, of course, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster in London and all across the UK. Coming up, water company executives have been threatened with jail time if they don't meet the government's environmental targets. Is this regulation gone mad, or perhaps the only way our rivers and seas can be saved? Elsewhere, pondside, Donald Trump faces another court hearing today for misconduct following the results of the 2020 election. Trump has already pled not guilty to the charges against him, but what impact could this have on his re-election bid? And of course, we're down to 5 in the Conservative leadership election, but with another round of voting to come next week. What political games will be played in order to survive? We'll have the latest very shortly. And the French President Emmanuel Macron has appointed former Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier as his new Prime Minister. Could this spell disaster, perhaps, for French-UK relations? That's all coming in your next hour. Breaking in the last few minutes, that Royal Navy helicopter crash in the English Channel. Unfortunately, one person has died. We will have the latest on that coming up very shortly. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Now, to bring you more on that breaking news, the Prime Minister has said he is deeply saddened by the death of a member of the Royal Navy after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel. The incident occurred during operations with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No other fatalities or serious injuries have been reported. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the family has been informed and a full investigation is underway. More updates as the story unfolds. The Crown Prosecution Service says it's dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman, now aged in her 50s, in 1996 in London. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and report to police. Water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. Environment Secretary Steve Reed says the previous government was too weak.
Instead of protecting our waterways, water companies were allowed to pay out multi-million-pound bonuses and billions in dividends, and the Conservative government was too weak to stop them. The result? This year's annual boat race here in Putney was overshadowed by health warnings telling rowers not to enter the water due to high levels of sewage. We've inherited a broken water system that affects us all, from the health and happiness of communities to the quality and resilience of our food system and the natural environment. These are systemic issues that require a proper reset with a reformed water sector.
Now, the government's admitted not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified following the damning findings published this week. The Prime Minister's pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry, with a full response due within 6 months. The report heavily criticised firms like Arconic and Kingspan, with families and survivors calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police are continuing to investigate potential criminal charges, which could take up to 18 months. Detectives investigating the murder of a top chef attacked near Notting Hill Carnival have released images of 16 potential witnesses. Musi Imnetu from Dubai was found unconscious with a head injury in Queensway in London and sadly died 4 days later. One man has been charged, but detectives are still piecing together the 41-year-old's movements from earlier that day. The Met Specialist Crime Command is urging anyone who recognises the people in the images to come forward. Detectives believe these individuals may have vital information to aid the investigation. A 14-year-old boy has appeared in court charged with murdering an 80-year-old grandfather in Leicestershire. Bim Coley, who died from a neck injury while walking his dog, was just seconds away from home. The boy, who cannot be named, has been remanded in custody and will appear at Leicester Crown Court this afternoon. He's due to appear at Leicester Crown Court. A gunman shot dead by police in central Munich has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national believed to have been living in Austria. That's according to the police. Authorities are still investigating the suspect's motive, but Germany's State Interior Minister confirmed the attack was planned on the Israeli consulate in Munich. Details are still emerging. And presenter Jeremy Kyle has defended his former TV programme at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show due to his depression. Despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon, Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News, and you probably just saw in the bulletin some breaking news from the last hour now. A member of the Royal Navy has died following a training incident last night in the English Channel. Joining us for the latest is our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Good afternoon, Charlie. What is the latest, please?
Well, a tragic incident in the Channel last night during a nighttime flying event exercise, Ben, with one helicopter being ditched in the Channel, leading to a crew member dying. 2 others were recovered at the scene, and the Coast Guard were involved in the rescue. We have heard from Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He said that he is deeply saddened to hear of the tragic death of a member of the Royal Navy. On X, he writes, "My thoughts are with the family and loved ones during this painful time." And he's also paid tribute to HMS Queen Elizabeth's company, particularly those involved in the search and rescue operation. Well, a Royal Navy spokesperson has said that it is with great sadness that we must report a member of the Royal Navy has died following a training incident last night. Our thoughts are with the family who have been informed and all those affected at this sad time. A full investigation. Also heard from Leonardo, which is the manufacturer of the Merlin helicopter, saying that they would like to extend their deepest condolences for the tragic loss of the recent Merlin Mark IV helicopter incident. Our thoughts are with all those affected by this event. So, as we were saying, Ben, the helicopter ditched while conducting night flying exercises from the HMS Queen Elizabeth, one of Britain's 2 aircraft carriers. It involved the Merlin Mark IV helicopter, which is involved with the Commando Helicopter Force. There are 2 variants of the Royal Navy's Merlin helicopter. This one for deploying and inserting Royal Marines, often in covert operations. So there were 3 crew members aboard the Merlin at the time. 2 of those were rescued and taken to hospital, but it's understood they did not suffer serious injuries. And another Merlin helicopter was involved in that night flying exercise, with HM Coast Guard later becoming involved in the rescue operation. No other fatalities or serious injuries, but one member of the Royal Navy has sadly died after this accident last night in the Channel.
OK, Charlie Peters, our national reporter, thank you. Awful news. Our thoughts go out to that the person who died, his colleagues, the Royal Navy, everybody involved. Really tragic news this afternoon. OK, we move on. Water bosses have been threatened with jail time if their firms fail to meet environmental targets. The government's new legislation will give regulators more powers to bring criminal charges against executives and enforce harsher fines for those pumping excess sewage into our rivers. And we can speak now to the environmental campaigner and pop star Fergal Sharkey about this. Fergal, good afternoon. Can you hear me? This is an issue very close to my heart, because I live very close to the sea, and I've said many times on this channel, the amount of times I've taken my boys down to the beach for a swim in the channel, and I can't because they're pumping raw sewage into the ocean, it dumbfounds me each and every time.
It's incredibly kind of you to refer to me as a pop star, Ben. It's been some years since anybody's done that. Listen, you are right. Today there is good news. At last, after years of denial, we have a government that acknowledges there is a massive problem out there, and it's huge and it's expansive. Sadly, today was the day that you need a government to step up, show leadership, make it smart, define its ambition and its authority, and all we've actually ended up with is a long line of stuff that, quite frankly, is going to cost nothing and deliver even less. They highlight, for example, that you've been illustrating the supposed jail sentence. It's only if executives obstruct an investigation, whatever that means. And by the way, this fundamentally been that idea. It's already law, has been law for almost 20 years. How directors of any company in the UK can face unlimited fines for that kind of environmental vandalism. I'm sure you can guess how many examples I can find in almost 20 years of any executive that's ever been prosecuted, never mind actually ended up facing a penny and a fine. The truth is, what government needed to do was actually intervene with really transformative, far-reaching action, and it's failed to deliver on that objective.
And Fergal, last year, Liv Garfield, who was the CEO of Severn Trent Water, took home a bonus of just shy of £600,000, and that was despite her company having been fined £2 million for dumping sewage. And a fact I saw earlier, we are a nation literally swimming in our own filth, are we not? Only 14% of England's rivers are assessed to have good ecological status. It's just astounding.
Oh, listen, the whole thing is, and that's why it needed a really firm hand with the vision, the determination, the ambition. By way of example, we're going to ban dividend payments. I'm really sorry. That actually is a part of every water company's operating licence. It's been like that for 35 years. Why on earth wasn't the regulator simply enforcing the law as we know it? And there's the underlying issue. None of this deals with actually fixing the real problem. And actually what should have happened today, the Secretary of State, as he has the power to do, should have ordered both Ofwat and the Environment Agency to get out there and enforce the existing law, to do so with enthusiasm and vigour. We don't need this legislation.
Yeah.
We've got 35 years worth of it. It's not enforced. It's worthless. Simply order the water companies and the regulators, do your job.
All right, Fergal, thank you for your expertise. Appreciate it. I mean, I've got a good idea. Why don't we just put the CEOs of these companies in bathtubs full of sewage every time they breach the law in that way? Maybe that will teach them. Joining us now for more on this is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Good afternoon, Catherine. What's your thoughts on this? All the campaigners today are saying that this doesn't go far enough, and in actual fact, they've had powers for many years but haven't really done anything about it.
Yes, good afternoon, Ben. Fergal, Sharkey and other environmental campaigners not impressed. The Liberal Democrats, who, of course, have now got 70-odd seats in Parliament, largely because of campaigning on the public anger about the state of our water, also saying that this is basically a halfway house and doesn't go far enough. That is not, of course, what Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, said. He was here down in Putney, just along to the side of me, at a rowing club this morning with a whole slew of announcements. This water special measures bill that's passing through Parliament, that he's pledging a reset. Let's see what he had to say earlier.
Instead of protecting our waterways, water companies were allowed to pay out multi-million-pound bonuses and billions in dividends, and the Conservative government was too weak to stop them. The result? This year's annual boat race here in Putney was overshadowed by health warnings telling rowers not to enter the water due to high levels of sewage. We've inherited a broken water system that affects us all, from the health and happiness of communities to the quality and resilience of our food system and the natural environment. These are systemic issues that require a proper reset with a reformed water sector.
Yeah, so he says this is a sector associated with decline and cover-ups. He's promising this reset. He says that legislation will be brought where potentially water bosses could go to jail for up to 2 years if they obstruct the Environment Agency or Ofwat, that bonuses will be banned for the bosses of firms that are polluting, that fines will be increased, that monitoring of sewage being discharged will be at 100%, and more measures. So he's talking tough. He was asked, we had a lobby briefing afterwards. We did ask him about nationalisation because, of course, Labour have talked previously about nationalising lots of things. They are going to renationalise the railways. But on water, he said nationalisation would cost billions and take years. I am more interested in a model that works. He is saying he's ruling nationalisation out. We quizzed him on that. And he's saying there's going to be tens of billion pounds worth of private investment from these water companies that's going to transform our water, that's going to bring tens of thousands of new jobs, and also saying that it's needed because come the 2030s, if things don't change, we're going to have real water shortages in this country. So lots of words, but whether the public will be convinced and how soon we will see change, well, we will find out in due course.
Indeed. Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. Yeah, and it's interesting, the water companies, they are, of course, privatised, but they have a monopoly. You can't choose who your water supplier is, unlike the electricity companies. There's competition. If you're lumped with Southern Water or Thames Water, that's it. Stuff it. No choice, unfortunately. Right, now, the Conservative leadership election continues to build tension within the party after, of course, yesterday, Priti Patel was knocked out of the contest. Her fellow candidates paid tribute to her efforts in the aftermath of her elimination, but she still hasn't publicly come out in support of any other candidate. Well, let's see if our Westminster correspondent Olivia Utley can provide more insight to that. Good afternoon, Olivia. Any idea who Priti may be backing as the days roll on?
We still just don't know, and it'll be really interesting to see whether her supporters, she had 14 supporters yesterday, vote in a pack all together, or if their vote is split across the candidates. Priti Patel was seen as one of the right-wing candidates in the race, so it's assumed that her backers will, on the whole, go for either Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch, who are seen as the two other right-wingers in the race. Now, Jenrick did quite a lot better than Kemi Badenoch last night. He got 28 votes to Kemi's 22. I mean, these are all very small numbers, of course, because there are so few Conservative MPs left. It looks as though Jenrick is the favourite among MPs. But if Kemi Badenoch makes it to the final two, it very much looks as though she would win when the question goes to members. She has double the support of Robert Jenrick for now. The big question is, how unpopular is Kemi Badenoch with Conservative MPs? There are plenty who I've spoken to who don't much like her, who think she can be a bit sort of ratty, a bit difficult to get on with, a bit prickly in interviews, etc. So there could be a sort of anyone but Kemi move in the next few weeks before it gets the final two to try and stop her being on the final ballot paper. We will see where those votes for Priti Patel end up landing, and that will give us a clearer indication.
Interesting. Did we not have a similar situation with Liz Truss a few years back when she wasn't Flavour of the Month with MPs? However, she did make it to the final two, and of course the members, you know, the rest is history, I guess, on that front. But she kind of made her way past the gauntlet of the members.
Well, exactly, which might have sort of taught MPs a lesson, if we can put it like that. It could be that after allowing Liz Truss to get through to the final two, and then Liz Truss being favoured among members, the MPs decide that they don't want to put Kemi Badenoch through to the final two. That said, I don't think there is the feeling against Kemi Badenoch in the party is much smaller, much more limited than it was to Liz Truss. I don't think you can compare the two women at all, but it'll be fascinating to see what happens. I think the members will be very, very annoyed if Kemi Badenoch doesn't make it to the final two, because she has been a firm favourite for a long time now. As I say, twice as popular as the second most popular candidate, who is Robert Jenrick.
Well, I guess that's been the Conservative Party's sort of thorn in their side for the past couple of years at least, because the members feel like the MPs in Parliament aren't listening to them. There's a complete divide. I mean, they would call them the Wets, the One Nation Tories, and then you've got the centre-right members and, of course, their favourite candidates as well. Robert Jenrick, I saw quite a slick campaign video from him a bit earlier today. It was 2 or 3 minutes long. He seems to be not quite Flavour of the Month with Con Home voters. Kemi, as you mentioned, is top of that list. If it came to Kemi and Jenrick in the final two with members, who do you think would win?
I think that Kemi would probably win. She's on 34% of the vote among Con Home on that Con Home poll, compared to Jenrick's 17%, and that Con Home poll is normally right. That said, I mean, there's still quite a lot of this contest to go. There is such a small number of Conservative MPs, only 122. And yesterday in the voting, not a single one of them managed to get 25% of the vote. I'm just saying it all feels very, very volatile at the moment. Everything could change. And the opinion could change among party members as well. A few months ago, Robert Jenrick was nowhere to be seen on that list of popularity among Conservative members, and now he's number 2.
Yeah, he's been making all the right noises when it comes to immigration, hasn't he? Lots of interviews with Patrick Christie's on this channel and whoever else about, tackling the migration crisis. Olivia Utley, thank you very much. We'll catch up with you later in the show. Sticking with politics, but stateside, how will Donald Trump's presidential bid be affected by the ongoing court cases against him? We'll get stuck into that just after the break. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are non-crime hate incidents a breach of your human rights?
It's crazy, isn't it? Freedom of speech is now on life support here, and we've had, in the last week alone, we've had Elon Musk being threatened. He's now out of Brazil with X. We've had the founder of Telegram basically being arrested, and he's been charged in France. We're not quite sure the circumstances why he was there, whether Macron invited him to the Olympics or whatever, but he's been arrested under several charges. And we've had all sorts of people who've been speaking out are basically being shut down. So it has to be freedom of thought, it has to be freedom of expression. It's one of our fundamental rights under the Human Rights Act of 1998. Article 10 gives you the right to express your opinion and also to air that publicly.
It's basically, I say something that somebody doesn't like, so probably one of my monologues, then somebody can then inform the police that I've upset them in some way, and then that goes on my record, so I now have a criminal record. Because somebody else who I've never met, who's never met me, has heard something that upset or hurt your feelings, then if I go for a certain job or I go for my DBS check, which I do regularly because I go and talk in schools, somebody can pull that up and go, well, you did something that had hurty feelings, and so now you can't have that job. That has got to be a breach of my human rights.
Oh, it's absolutely. Article 10, it's a fundamental right to protect your freedom of speech and so on and so forth. And this is what's really worrying, because it's happening around the world, as I say, in Brazil, in France, in various other countries. In America, Zuckerberg, he came out in the last few days and said the pressure that he was put under by the Biden administration, first of all about COVID, and even jokes he was told to suppress them. The other thing that he was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And he said he couldn't speak about that because they were telling him not to. And what he did, he had to fact check, and he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon, only on GB News. Let's get stuck into some emails now and some views from you. They've been flying in, not least on the Tory leadership contest. Of course, Priti Patel dumped out yesterday. Dick, you say Kemi is poor. Good news for reform, though, although the Tories will change their leader about a dozen times by the time of the next election. Yeah, if it goes the full 5 years, you could probably see that happening. I agree with you. Bridget, on water companies, good afternoon. You say nobody takes into account that we have a large housing developments built without improvement to drainage, pumping stations and treatment works. Yeah, good point. And also immigration, of course, an explosion in mass migration over the past 20 years. And the argument is that the infrastructure we have at the moment for our waterways is Victorian in some places and just cannot hold and handle the load. Ken, on electric cars, you say they're currently outrageously priced. When a price is going to come down, why should I switch from my trusty Astra for a smaller car priced 30k more? We're talking about electric cars because we've got the managing director of Vauxhall Motors on the show in about, I think, 40 minutes now. So it comes, of course, off the back of plunging electric car sales, Volkswagen in Germany closing 2 of their factories, and, of course, Labour in their manifesto, they've not announced it yet, but in their manifesto they did say they would reverse the Tories' 2030 petrol diesel ban. So the Tories, of course, before they lost government, they aligned with the EU by pushing the petrol and diesel car ban back to 2035. In their manifesto, Labour is bringing it back to 2030. And that is causing a lot of problems for car manufacturers because they're struggling to hit their EV targets. Net zero gone mad. OK, we move on. Donald Trump's hearing into his conduct following the 2020 election has begun today in Washington, D.C. The former president faces 4 charges, and that's relating to his conduct following the 2020 election results, which he falsely claimed was rigged. Well, for more is our US correspondent Steve Edgington. Good morning, Steve. Is it morning where you are? Oh, we can't hear you, unfortunately. We'll try and get you back. So just as a recap, Donald Trump, of course, in the wake of the 2020 election, he claimed it was rigged. I mean, I watched it live, like many of you at home did. Trump was steaming ahead throughout the night, and then suddenly, when a lot of mail ballot votes came in, 3, 4 a.m., the tide turned to Biden. In the wake of that election, of course, Trump was going around saying it was rigged, it was a stitch-up. That led to the January 6 riots. And today, he's in court on a brand-new indictment by special counsel saying that he... we've got Steve now. Good morning, Steve. What's the latest on the court case today? Trump, of course, pleads not guilty to this. How will all this drama affect the election come November? Oh, no, we've not got him. There we go. That's what happens with transatlantic comms. We'll see if we can put 20p in the lecky meter like we did with Olivia yesterday. So sources familiar with Fox News said that discussions surrounding the indictment won't be sped up, basically, before the election in November. So even if Trump is found guilty and something comes off the back of that in terms of a sentence, it won't happen until post the election anyway. I don't think it's going to have much of an effect on the election. How many times have we seen Donald Trump in courts accused of felonies or crimes or civil matters? When it comes to his voter base, the MAGA base, it doesn't do anything. He just brushes it off. And, of course, we saw that in 2016 as well with the Access Hollywood tapes. Everybody thought that secret recording of Donald Trump saying some pretty graphic stuff about women would destroy his campaign. I mean, in fact, it did the complete opposite. We'll try and get Steve back shortly for the latest in Washington, D.C. But for now, let's head to your news headlines with Sophia Wenzel.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 3:30. Your headlines. The Prime Minister has said he is deeply saddened by the death of a member of the Royal Navy after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel. The incident occurred during operations with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No other fatalities or serious injuries have been reported. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the family has been informed and a full investigation is underway. More updates as the story unfolds. The Crown Prosecution Service says it's dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman now aged in her 50s in 1996 in London. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and report to police. In other news, water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. An urgent appeal's been launched to find a 10-month-old girl who's gone missing with her father. Merseyside police are asking the public to help find Layla Rose Wheeler, who was last seen in the area of Wallasey Village in Wirral. A spokesman from the force said there's concern for both of their welfare and added the girl has short blonde hair and blue eyes. And presenter Jeremy Kyle has defended his former TV programme at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show due to his depression. Despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3160 and 1.1871 euros. The price of gold is £1,912 and 2 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,271 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Big contrast today developing across the UK. Very wet in the south, drier elsewhere, and increasingly warm in the northwest. That's where the best of the sunshine will be over the next few days, with easterly winds around the northern flank of this area of low pressure over the continent. And that's the low that is causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low, the instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mist, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on the summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sunshine in the northwest, temperatures reaching the mid-20s for parts of western Scotland. Could be the warmest day of the year so far on Friday. And it's going to feel humid wherever you are, and that humidity continuing as we begin the weekend. Actually, plenty of fine weather at first on Saturday, further rain to come in the south on Sunday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello again, I'm Jules Buckley. Northbound M6, the exit slip to the M62, that's the Croft interchange 21A. There's been a collision on that slip road there, so it's part blocked and queuing. 5 Mile Drive, this is the A44 in Worcestershire. It's shut between the Saintbury turnoff in Broadway and the Blockley turning in Chipping Camden. A 2-car collision there means no way through and the road's closed. A collision means restrictions in place, looking stop-start on the live cameras. Tulse Hill in London, that's the A204 between the South Circular and Trinity Right has been closed as emergency services deal with an incident, so that's queuing. And the A272 in Winchester in Hampshire, that's currently shut between the Preshaw turning and the Boworth turnoff in Cheriton. Delays there at the scene of an accident.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News. Hope you're keeping well and warm because it's pretty miserable outside the last time I checked. Anyway, we move on. Millions of people across the country are unfortunately at breaking points as shockingly low incomes leave them hungry, without the basics and fearing debt collectors. That's all according to debt advice charity Christians Against Poverty, who have released a report today showing 11.8 million people in the UK don't have enough money to live on. Anna Riley has the story.
Christians Against Poverty debt advisors like Helen Bolton provide free financial support in churches across the nation. The charity's latest report warns that chronically low incomes are devastating the lives of millions in the UK. This is due to a deficit budget where people's earnings aren't enough to cover the essentials.
We're really surprised to find out that 22% of the population are in this situation, and that equates in the UK to 14.4 million people that are inevitably living in poverty because they've not got enough money coming in to pay their essential bills. The overall headline inflation is coming down, but inflation on the basics of life is not coming down, or is coming down very, very slowly. Meanwhile, incomes, whether that's salaries, wages, or benefits, have not gone up anywhere near in line with inflation, and so inevitably things are squeezed.
Michelle Neal was helped by the charity after falling into £30,000 of debt. Her home was repossessed and she relied on food banks as her carer's wage didn't cover her bills.
There weren't any food in house. It was just one nightmare after another, and we had to start... Well, basically what we had to do is we had to go back and live with Mum for a while. And bearing in mind Mum had dementia, which weren't good, but fortunately council came through because we were classed as homeless. Council came through and we got... It weren't greatest of properties, but it were a roof over his head. Not easy when you're on your own, paying bills and things like that, especially if it's going to go up.
With the energy price increase next month, Christians Against Poverty want the government to take action now.
We will have people who are cold, who are sitting in the dark, who have... The mental health is going down the pan. One of the things that we're campaigning for is for the government to look at like a minimum income standard, whether that is through benefits or whether that is through legislation about minimum wages or minimum hours that people are contracted for. I guess just to accept that there's not a lot more can be done about expenditure, and so we've got to look at giving a minimum level of income to all families.
Christians Against Poverty are calling for the public to support their campaign, and they hope the Labour Party will listen. Anna Riley, GB News.
Yeah, really damning indictment. Politicians and governments, they bang on about GDP and inflation's falling, but, you know, the real measure of poverty and quality of life in this country is GDP per capita, which continues to contract. And if you ask me, that just blows apart the myth that uncontrolled mass migration is good for growing the economy. I think it's a bit of a myth, and actually Robert Jenrick says the same thing in his Tory election campaign. But yeah, very, very sad news indeed. 11 million people in a country like the UK living in poverty. Something's gone wrong somewhere. So thank you, Anna Riley, for that. We move on. In a shocking move from the French President Emmanuel Macron, former Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier, remember him, has been appointed as the French Prime Minister. The hard pro-European politician will take up the position following weeks of instability in France, following the surge of their far-right riots in recent elections. Well, let's get the reaction to that news now from the French journalist David Chazan. Bonjour, David. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining me. Michel Barnier, of course, Nigel Farage calls him an EU fanatic. What will this appointment mean for Britain, not least in our ambition to stop the boats? Of course, we need the French's cooperation with that.
I think the French on that will continue to go on, and I think a conservative, centre-right dominated government led by Michel Barnier will continue to press Britain to negotiate an asylum treaty with the EU, which the French see as the solution to perhaps not stopping the small boats, but certainly cutting the numbers of people who attempt to make the dangerous crossing, which, as we saw just a few days ago, is too often fatal for too many people.
In 2018, Michel Barnier, he was the EU's chief Brexit negotiator at the time. He warns that there was a Nigel Farage-type politician or character in every country. Nigel responded to that by saying thank you for the compliment. But he also attacked populist deceit, as he called it, across the continent and said the European project is fragile. That, of course, was in 2018. How do you think he sees the European project now? Of course, we have had Brexit since then.
Well, I think he's certainly pro-European, pro-EU, but nevertheless, he has toughened some of his positions, because in 2021, he called for a moratorium on immigration to France from outside the EU, and he seems to have learned some of the lessons of Brexit, because he also said that French courts and their rulings should take precedence over European courts. So this was quite controversial at the time. It marked a significant rightward shift by Michel Barnier, and so these are issues that he may find common ground with Marine Le Pen on. And the stability of the government he's about to form will depend on the goodwill of Marine Le Pen. She's ruled out members of her party joining the government, but she says they'll look at its policies issue by issue, and they will not necessarily vote against this government in any vote of no confidence, which is likely to be called by the left-wing alliance, which won the most seats in the recent parliamentary elections, but still short of a majority.
Yeah, because there was talk, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was going to be a PM from the Left Alliance, wasn't there? What happened with that?
Well, it seems that the PM from the left, who was a former socialist prime minister called Cazeneuve, was Macron's first choice. But when he saw that the left-wing alliance would immediately vote against that government in a vote of no confidence, he shifted to a conservative candidate. The problem was that the left-wing candidate that he chose, Bernard Cazeneuve, is a former member of the Socialist Party, but he quit the party when it joined an alliance with the hard left France Unbowed Party to go into the recent parliamentary elections and try to block Marine Le Pen's National Rally from winning power. So when he saw that the former socialist candidate was unpalatable to the left, he decided to go for a conservative.
OK, and how do you think this new government now, so you've got Macron, you've got the new PM, how do you think they'll get on with our new Labour government and Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, I think Michel Barnier is very much a known quantity for establishment politicians across Europe. He is somebody that Keir Starmer will probably feel he can do business with. The EU, Ursula von der Leyen, very pleased by this. He's a candidate, or he's a prime minister now, of course, who will reassure the financial markets, which is key for France at the moment, because one thing the markets don't like is political instability and unknown quantities. So he's very much a sort of business as usual candidate. The big question is whether he can retain the essential support that he's going to need from Marine Le Pen's party to avoid being toppled in any vote of no confidence.
OK, David Shazan, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All eyes across the continent. OK, some breaking news to bring you now. The Home Office have announced they will not use RAF Scampton for asylum accommodation. The Home Office has made their decision as their latest assessment found the site is not value for money for the taxpayer. So just to reiterate that, the Home Office has just announced they will not use RAF Scampton for asylum accommodation because it does not prove decent value for money for the taxpayer. Of course, that is a site that has previously caused controversy. They've had some public health incidents and so on. So RAF Scampton will not be continued to be used for asylum seekers. Well, coming up, we'll be hearing about the 14-year-old boy charged with the murder of an 80-year-old grandfather in Leicester. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
One local cricket team was made up entirely of one family. the Jollens.
The Newmarket midweek seconds played Thurlow and Old Mill Greenian seconds, captained by, here we go, James Jolland. He played alongside family members Henry, Freddie, George, Jack, Archie, Ryan, Brandon and Daniel. Even if slightly controversial, one of the umpires was a Jolland to Stephen the umpire.
Yes, well, the Jolland family mostly live in Wickenbrook in Suffolk and have played for 4 years for Dullingham Village team before it merged with Newmarket. So that's the entire backstory. We're delighted to be joined now by Captain James Jolland and teammate and brother Nick Jolland. Really good to see you both this morning. This is incredible. How did you get the entire family involved in cricket?
Well, we started the club about 3 years ago, and it was more friends and family. But then it had this opportunity of this week to get everyone involved, because everyone was back and they all played cricket, various levels, and the youngest being 12, George, and we're all available. So we thought 1 week we'd do the whole team.
You booted the friends out for 1 week only?
Yeah, they were very good about it. They come and watched. They supported us.
How did the other team feel about having an umpire with related ties?
Well, the captain of the Thurlow is one of our friends. We do know him, so he was fine with it, and there was no controversial decisions at all.
I think it's a fantastic strategy.
No, yeah.
You could plant somebody.
That's the way
in a position of authority. It's a great idea.
Oh, look, here's the scorecard we can see on the screen with all of your names on there. Some fantastic English names on there. How does it get between the family members? Is it very, very competitive between you all?
As you get older, you work on that, don't you? And you keep that competitiveness out of it. And it's really to play with your sons. It's a great thing to do.
Yeah, it's a lovely
We've
thing
all
to
got
do.
sons in it. That's why we do it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Ben Leo, covering for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News. A 14-year-old boy has appeared in Leicester Crown Court charged with murder and remanded at a youth detention accommodation centre. A murder investigation was launched after Bim Coley died after being seriously injured near the entrance of Franklin Park in Braunston Town in Leicestershire, just seconds away from his home on Sunday evening. Our reporter Will Hollis has the latest. Good afternoon, Will.
Good afternoon. Yes, well, that 14-year-old boy who can't be named for legal reasons around the protection of his identity, which is afforded to most young people that appear in court in the judicial system, appeared here at Leicester Crown Court. He was charged with, as the judge described it, a single offence of murder. Wearing a black tracksuit, he was joined in the court, not in the same part, but in a different part, by 3 members of his family. And the judge today, William Harbidge, said that to the boy that there is a long way to go before this matter comes to trial. A long way indeed. It will be the 17th of February when the boy will be in court facing that trial, accused of the murder of 80-year-old Bim Coley. But until then, he's been remanded in a youth detention accommodation, so that's essentially custody for young people. But he will be given the opportunity to enter a plea once again here in about a month's time at Leicester Crown Court on the 11th of October, where they will make some of the arrangements for the finer details of that trial. But that will be on the 11th of October, around about a month away. And as you said quite rightly, Ben, Mr. Coley died was attacked only seconds away from his house in Braunston Town, which is a suburb of the city Leicester. He died, however, about an hour away at Nottingham's Queen's Medical Centre, where he was taken, and the police say that after a post-mortem examination, it is believed that he died of a neck injury, but they'll be doing some further tests. His family, which we know from reports he was very close to, have described him as a loving, caring person who took his dog Rocky for multiple walks every single day around that same park. But it's ultimately that dog walk which led to his death.
OK, well, yeah, awful story. Thank you for that. We'll keep a keen eye on it, of course, as it develops. And the trial, as Will said there, probably won't come for some time. Our thoughts are with Mr. Coley and his family. Let's read some emails that have been flying in before we head to the break. David, talking about electric vehicles, and the reason we're talking about EVs is because I've got the managing director of Vauxhall Cars, who will be with me after the break, talking about electric vehicles, the fact that demand apparently is plummeting for EVs, lots of people going back to petrol and diesel cars, and of course Labour in their manifesto said they would bring the deadline for the ban on petrol and diesel cars forward again to 2030. Of course, the Tories pushed it back to align with the EU to 2035. David, good afternoon. You say my Mocha E crashed due to breaking down and engaging park instead of neutral. Back on petrol now, electric cars equals useless. That sounds terrifying, David. Sorry you went through that experience. Jack, you say everybody needs water, but mass immigration has increased the population by 20%, which is 10 million plus, and nobody wants a water reservoir anywhere near their home. Don't blame the water companies, you say. This goes back to government level. And Adrian, you say whether you house them at RAF Scampton or not, talking about asylum seekers, that breaking news from a minute ago, whether you house them there or not, it's not saving money at all. More lies and more lies. Well, the announcement about RAF Scampton is that the Home Office will not be continuing using the site anymore. £60 million, they say, the Home Office has already been spent on the site, housing 2,000 asylum seekers. Lots of controversy. I can recall from the top of my head incidents over the past year or so with disorder outside the site, protesters, that there was the burning of a dam busters flag as well. The Home Office says opening the site from this autumn as planned would have cost a total of £122 million by the end of its use in 2027, meaning the site no longer represents value for money for taxpayers. Well, I'm glad they've got taxpayers in mind. You could save a couple of quid and fill that £22 billion black hole. Whose fault was it? I don't know. But you could plug the gap by perhaps starting with the £11 billion we're sending to Africa in climate aid. The Home Office goes on to say that clearing the asylum backlog, when they do it eventually, who knows when that will be, will save around £7.7 billion in asylum costs over the next decade. Right, we'll wait and see. Well, in just a few moments, we'll have more on the government threatening water bosses with jail time and also scrapping of their bonuses if they don't stop pumping raw sewage into our waterways. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel. Back in a tick.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Big contrast today, developing across the UK. Very wet in the south, drier elsewhere, and increasingly warm in the northwest. That's where the best of the sunshine will be over the next few days, with easterly winds around the northern flank of this area of low pressure over the continent. And that's the low that is causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low. The instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mists, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on the summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sunshine in the northwest, temperatures reaching the mid-20s for parts of western Scotland. Could be the warmest day of the year so far on Friday. And it's going to feel humid wherever you are, and that humidity continuing as we begin the weekend. Actually, plenty of fine weather at first on Saturday, further rain to come in the south on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Lincolnshire, the southbound A1 just after the Little Ponton junction, so Grantham South, that turn off there. There's a lane shutter collision, means queues back towards the Melton Mowbray turn off. Westbound M4 just before Swindon East at junction 15. The early overturned vehicle all being sorted out now. Still seeing queues though, all lanes are back open. Into Stoke-Southampton in Somerset, the Western Relief Road. The southbound A3088 is shut from the Cartgate roundabout. So from the A303 towards Yeovil, that's at the scene of a fallen tree. Southbound M23 just before Gatwick Airport, that's junction 9, lane 1 of 4's combed off, slow going at the scene of a collision. And the southbound M3, there's a breakdown on the exit slip road at 4A for Farnborough. That slip road's closed southbound and it's queuing. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is your
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. I'm Ben Leo, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Water company executives have been threatened with jail time if they don't meet the government's environmental targets. Is this regulation gone mad, or the only way our rivers and our seas can be saved? And Donald Trump faces another court hearing today for misconduct following the results of the 2020 election. Trump has already pled not guilty to the charges against him, but what impact could this have on his re-election bid? And of course, we're down to 5 in the Conservative leadership election, but with another round of voting to come next week, what political games and skullduggery will be played in order to survive? We'll have the latest very shortly. And Prince William speaks to artists about the growing plight of homelessness in the UK. The Prince of Wales toured the Saatchi Gallery in London to see their special exhibition, all while rumours about his brother continue to swirl in the background. That's all coming in your next hour. And once again this afternoon, I'm all by myself. I don't know how Martin does it. He loves being in the studio by on his own. I don't, unfortunately. So I want to hear from you. I need your company. Send your views and your comments to gbnews.com/yoursay or on Twitter @GBNews. Time now for your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 4 o'clock. Some breaking news to start with. The Home Office has confirmed it will not use RAF Scampton to house asylum seekers. Labour has scrapped the former Conservative government's plan to house asylum seekers at the former RAF base in Lincolnshire. Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle said the plan, which has already cost £60 million, fails to deliver value for money for the taxpayer. The Prime Minister has said he is deeply saddened by the death of a member of the Royal Navy after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel. The incident occurred during operations with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No other fatalities or serious injuries have been reported. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the family has been informed and a full investigation is underway. The Crown Prosecution Service says it's dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman, now aged in her 50s, in 1996 in London. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and report to police. In other news, water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. Environment Secretary Steve Reed says the previous government was too weak.
Instead of protecting our waterways, water companies were allowed to pay out multi-million-pound bonuses and billions in dividends, and the Conservative government was too weak to stop them. The result? This year's annual boat race here in Putney was overshadowed by health warnings telling rowers not to enter the water due to high levels of sewage. We've inherited a broken water system that affects us all, from the health and happiness of communities to the quality and resilience of our food system and the natural environment. These are systemic issues that require a proper reset with a reformed water sector.
Now, the government's admitted not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified. That's following the damning findings published this week. The Prime Minister's pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry, with a full response due within 6 months. The report heavily criticised firms like Arconic and Kingspan, with families and survivors calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police are continuing to investigate potential criminal charges, which could take up to 18 months. A 14-year-old boy has appeared in court charged with murdering an 80-year-old grandfather in Leicestershire. Bim Coley, who died from a neck injury while walking his dog, was just seconds away from home. The boy, who cannot be named, has been remanded in custody and will appear at Leicester Crown Court this afternoon. Olympic marathon runner Rebecca Cheptegei has died after being set on fire by her boyfriend. That's according to the head of Uganda's Olympic Committee. The 33-year-old, who competed just weeks ago in Paris, suffered burns to over 75% of her body in the attack. She's the third female athlete killed in the country since 2021. The Ugandan president called the attack cowardly and senseless and condemned violence against women. And Jeremy Kyle has defended his presenting style at an inquest into the death of a man who had been a guest on his chat show, saying it was direct, but it was empathetic, it was honest. 63-year-old Steve Diamond from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show due to his depression. Despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Now, if you didn't know, we appear to be a nation swimming in our own filth. Water sewage has been, or raw sewage rather, has been seeping into our waterways, our rivers, our seas, the English Channel. I live by the coast down in Sussex, and the amount of times, and I say many times in this channel, the amount of times I've taken my boys down to the beach to have a dip in the water, and I can't because the water company down there, I won't name them, but the water company are pumping filth into the sea. It's disgusting. But now, water bosses, they've been threatened with jail time if their firms fail to meet environmental targets. The government's new legislation will give regulators more powers to bring criminal charges against top executives and enforce harsher fines for those pumping excess sewage into our rivers and seas. Joining us now for more on this is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, campaigners this afternoon saying that actually this doesn't go far enough.
Yes, we've heard Fergal Sharkey saying that, and a number of other environmental groups saying it doesn't go far enough either. The Liberal Democrats, who made this one of their key issues for campaigning and got over 70 seats, partly as a result of that, realise that people are very, very angry about this. This is one of the measures in the King's speech that has the most popular support to clamp down on these badly behaving water companies and water bosses. So, Ben, you being cross about this, you are far, far from alone. Plenty of people saying it doesn't go far enough, but Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, of course, takes a very different view, announcing what this water special measures bill that's going through Parliament will mean. He was talking a little bit earlier at a rowing club here in Putney. Let's have a look at what he had to say.
Instead of protecting our waterways, water companies were allowed to pay out multi-million-pound bonuses and billions in dividends, and the Conservative government was too weak to stop them. The result? This year's annual boat race here in Putney was overshadowed by health warnings telling rowers not to enter the water due to high levels of sewage. We've inherited a broken water system that affects us all, from the health and happiness of communities to the quality and resilience of our food system and the natural environment. These are systemic issues that require a proper reset with a reformed water sector.
Yes, he also said that the whole sector was associated with decline and cover-up. So some of the measures that they're announcing include the really headline-grabbing claim that water bosses could go to jail for up to 2 years if they obstruct the work of the Environment Agency and Ofwat, the regulator. Now, I have to say, I think that's very unlikely. I think this is more about sending a message to them that the consequences could be serious, and hoping that they will then fall into line. Also saying they're going to ban bonuses for bosses of companies that break the rules. They're going to have 100% monitoring of the emergency storm overflows, not just the non-emergency ones, that fines are going to be increased, and much, much more. Now, he also mentioned nationalisation because, of course, this Labour government is renationalising the railways. That's something that has been talked about. But he said very clearly, nationalisation would cost billions and take years. I am more interested in a model that works. Now, we had a little sort of lobby huddle, journalist and the Environment Secretary, after his speech. We asked him very specifically about that. And yes, he says that they are ruling out taking water into public ownership. He's also promising tens of billions of pounds of private investment that he says the water companies are going to put into water in this country, and that there's going to be 9 new reservoirs, because apparently come the late 2030s we're simply not going to have enough water for all the people in this country as things stand. But of course, saying that you're going to get all this investment from private companies and it actually happening are two rather different things.
Catherine, thanks very much. Yeah, interesting. They're worried about there not being enough water to go around in the years to come. I mean, you could do something about uncontrolled mass migration, but anyway, just an idea. Now, really interesting development in the car world, because pressure is on manufacturers pressure is on car manufacturers as they continue to bow down to the government's new electric car mandates, which aims to make 22% of new cars sold in the UK electric by the end of this year. But what other pressures and regulations are affecting the way cars are built and sold in the UK? Well, I'm very pleased to say that the managing director of Vauxhall Motors, James Taylor, is with us now. Good afternoon, James. Really appreciate you being with me this afternoon. Let's talk about this mandate first of all, because as far as I understand, it's causing all sorts of headaches for companies like yours. And I believe now the petrol and diesel cars you're making in the UK is at record lows, around 4%, and that's just so you can hit the EV targets. Is that right?
Well, certainly the zero emission mandate has put some quite tough targets in terms of getting to electrification. So 22% of cars sold this year, new cars, need to be electric. The market's running around about 16%. The good news for Vauxhall is we're really well placed. We've got electric versions of every single car and van in our range, and we did 29% mix in August. So there clearly is demand there if you can get your product right and your pricing right.
What do you make of Volkswagen, for example, closing down their German factories? And of course, the USA is predicting electric car uptake by 2050 in America will only be something around 20%. Is the demand really there?
Well, this is another good thing about our strategy. Now, we've got a multi-powertrain strategy, so every single model, whether it's a Corsa or an Astra, is available as a petrol or it's available as an electric. So what that does from a manufacturing point of view is give us that flexibility to move with demand. But what's really important, I think, from a growth point of view, is we're fixing the pricing point, we're fixing range. What's got to come now is the infrastructure, and that's why we call on government to do more and local councils to do more to put that charging infrastructure in place. We've just commissioned some research with Cenex that shows overall we've got broadly the right amount of charging for on-street residential charging, but really we need that to be a year or two ahead of demand if it's going to encourage more people to make the switch.
As a driver myself, I've had chances to move on to electric vehicles and ditch my diesel car. I won't tell you what it is. It's a gas guzzler, if anyone's watching. But the issue is, for example, with your Corsa, correct me if I'm wrong, I think if you've got a 7.4 kilowatt-hour home charging wall box, it takes around 7 hours to charge a Corsa. And the range is, 220 to 240 miles?
Yes,
so in comparison to, say, me taking my car down the petrol station, filling it up in, circa 3 minutes and driving from Sussex to Scotland, pretty much on a full tank, there's not really much incentive there, for me anyway, as a petrol lover, to move over to EVs. What can you say to people like me to encourage us to make the move?
Well, I think there's lots of benefits of electric driving. So you've got the whole green point about cleaner emissions, cleaner air in our cities, etc. You've also got the driving dynamics, no gears because they're all automatic, much smoother, faster acceleration, etc. There's lots of actual benefits. But the other point as well is cost. Now, you can run an electric car if you do charge overnight, as you've suggested, for as little as 2 pence per mile. If it's a petrol vehicle, you could be well into 10 pence or even 20 pence a mile. So there's big economic reasons to change, as well as all the great benefits in electric cars themselves.
Yeah, some of the new EVs do look very slick indeed. My only issue with them, James, is that from a road safety perspective, you can't hear them coming along. And I've noticed myself, because I've got young children, when I'm crossing the road, I've realised that one of the main sort of alert systems that I use for crossing the road, beyond my eyes, of course, is hearing cars coming down the road. But a lot of these EVs, they're almost silent, which is great in one aspect if you're inside. But from a road safety perspective, there's a few issues there, don't you think?
Well, I think there is noise when the cars are going along, because clearly there's tyre noise as you get with normal cars. Obviously, the faster you go, the louder that noise is outside. But something we're all, as you say, going to get used to, because we're on this electric journey. The future will be electric. So that is something that we're all going to have to get used to in our towns and cities.
So, look, Labour, in their manifesto, they've not announced it yet, but it was in their manifesto, they've pledged to reinstate the 2030 petrol and diesel car ban. I'm sure it would have been a lot easier for firms like Vauxhall to have the 2035 ban. You wouldn't be scrambling around to kind of hit these targets and so on. What's your thoughts on Labour bringing that date forward again and going out of alignment with the EU?
Yeah, clearly what we do like is consistency. We don't like policy changing on a continual basis. But as scientists and as a parent of Vauxhall, we've always said we're very supportive of the ZEV mandate. That's the transition that we want to go on. As I say, today we've got every single vehicle in our range available as petrol or electric. So whether the ban is 2030 or 2035, we're really well prepared for that change.
And I read earlier, actually, one of your, you can name it because I've forgotten it, one of your vehicles is now priced, it's got price parity. So whether you choose an EV version or diesel petrol version, it's the same price.
That's exactly right. We launched price parity in terms of monthly payments across our electric range earlier in the year. But you're right, the Frontera, which is a family-sized SUV, it's the very first kind of mainstream mass-market car that's available at exactly the same sticker price, whether you say it's a petrol hybrid or whether it's full electric. So it's a real industry first.
James, I know you have to kind of, toe the line when it comes to EVs because you've got commitments to net zero and so on, you've got the mandates. But Volvo, for example, they've ditched their target to sell only electric cars by 2030, opting to instead continue selling some petrol vehicles alongside battery models. Tesla's making 14,000 people redundant. In March, German sales of electric cars collapsed 30%. I mean, is the future really all rosy and EV dominated? If you had a choice now to say, no, we're going to stick to producing petrol and diesel cars, and there was no government mandate, there was no march towards net zero, would you choose that from a business perspective?
I think we're all committed for the environmental reasons to the ZEV mandate. I think we've said that as Stellantis and as Vauxhall up to this point. So, as I said previously, whether the government set the ban at 2035 or 2030, we've got every single model available today. Customers can make that choice. And I think it's important, as you say, that the customers can make that choice themselves. And that's why we call on government to keep putting the infrastructure in place. So more people, particularly those without off-street parking, 40% of the UK population, are able to make that choice to go electric and enjoy all the great benefits that electric driving brings.
OK, got it. And just finally, very briefly, talking about the environmental aspect of it, where do EV batteries end up once they're done with? Because there are lots of conflicting reports about them going to landfill and so on. Where do they go?
Yeah, so that's a very important point. Clearly, there's lots of recycling legislation linked to electric cars, as you'd imagine, on a European and on a UK basis. So many of those cars, many of those batteries are now going into battery storage as a second use. So certainly they'll be reused. They certainly won't be thrown away.
OK, James, thank you very much. James Taylor, the MD of Vauxhall Motors, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you.
There we go. Did he sway you? Did he sway you to ditch your gas-guzzling Jag or, whatever you've got and maybe take up an electric vehicle? For me, I've said to colleagues out there, and they all laughed their heads off at me earlier, I said, I just love the smell of petrol. You go into a forecourt, you smell the petrol. It's one of my favourite smells, believe it or not. And also the purr of an engine and, the vibrations of a car. Nothing beats it. Pretty similar to, say, I guess, vinyl records. I used to DJ back in the day, had ambitions of being a superstar DJ at some point, but it's kind of like vinyl records. The needle going down on the vinyl, you can hear, the crackling and whatever else. But anyway, let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Back on track now. Who will be the next candidate eliminated in the Conservative leadership elections? We'll have more on that next. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
70% of population will make a judgment on someone just by looking at them. And within 2-3 seconds, we make a decision if we like someone or not.
Really? Is it that quick?
So it's actually very, very fast. So before we have a chance to kind of express what we want to say, our subconscious mind is kind of looking for clues. So you look at someone and you look at their, for example, I don't know, the watch they're wearing, maybe the makeup. I spent literally my whole childhood learning, being absolutely mesmerized by my mom's ability to choose different style of clothing for different style personalities. British definitely take a pride in their appearance. They do spend time to look good. There is a lot of amazing British designers. For me, it was always about that feeling that I've learned from my mom's shop, how the people were living, buying certain things. And I was like, oh my God, they look happy. They've got this big smile on their face. My main objective always was to make people feel good. So now as a stylist, I help them to go through style therapy. I help them to discover colors that are good for their colors that they wear them close to their face, but also it sets the tone for their wardrobe. And then we look at the outfit formula. So it's, yeah. When I look at Ellie's dress sense, I was just thinking, OK, she likes to be polished.
I do like to be polished.
Exactly. Elegant, timeless. I look at the reference to the dress you're wearing today. It's that kind of Chanel, black and white, timeless, never go out of fashion. So for me, it's about, it's not the trends, but how you would like your personal style to be and how timeless it can be.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney on GB News this afternoon. Now, the Conservative leadership election continues to build tension within the party after Priti Patel, of course, was knocked out of the contest yesterday with just 14 votes. Her fellow candidates paid tribute to her efforts in the aftermath of her elimination, but she's still not publicly come out in support of any other candidate just yet. Well, joining me for more on this now is the Shadow Culture, Media and Sports Secretary, Julia Lopez. Good afternoon, Julia. Thank you for joining me. First of all, your initial reactions to that it's been described as a bombshell elimination. Priti perhaps expected to go a little bit further than being knocked out in the first round.
I think what's interesting in the first round is just how distributed the votes are. It's the first opportunity for us to really understand what the remaining MP part of the party is about. And so I don't think it's enormously surprising because there actually there weren't many votes in it between all candidates. There were sort of 3 front runners and then 3 in the bottom half who were, both sets had votes fairly close together. So, I mean, Priti is an important figure in the party and one who commands a lot of support in the membership. But really there was only 1 or 2 votes between her and the other candidates. So it was just an opportunity for us really to understand where this new parliamentary party lies.
I spoke to people close to Priti's camp yesterday and they said they were, quote, shocked and stunned at being eliminated in the first round. And they suggested that perhaps there was some strategic voting going on, votes being lent to different candidates in a bid to eliminate Priti off the first bat. What do you make of that?
Look, I mean, Conservative leadership rounds are always unpredictable and you can always get a straight answer from colleagues when you are asking them what their voting intentions are. So, you know, it's hard to know what to expect sometimes. And as I say, it's the first opportunity really for us post the general election to get a flavour of the remaining 121 MPs that we have here. So, in a sense, none of us had any clear expectations as to how this might play out.
And Julia, do you recognise this divide that lots of our viewers and Tory members talk about between the parliamentary party and One Nation MPs and the membership, who it's argued a lot more right-leaning than a big cohort of the MPs you've got in Parliament? Because when Prissy was eliminated yesterday, the emails we got from viewers were pretty much akin to, well, this says it all about the Conservative Party. They've not learnt anything about their election defeat, and we're going to end up with a couple of One Nation candidates in the bottom two who the membership really don't approve of.
Well, I mean, there is always a risk of the Westminster bubble, and I've seen it in operation before. I mean, I'm backing Kemi Badenoch, and I think it's critical that we manage to align the MP votes with the membership votes. I think conference is going to be a really important opportunity for us to be able to do that. Kemi is consistently topping member polls, and so that's one of our key messages to colleagues, is that Kemi is supported very vigorously by the members, and we've got to make sure that she's in the final two so that members get that choice.
Why are you backing Kemi, Julia?
Well, look, Kemi, for a start, is not calling it Kemi for Leader. She is trying to launch a whole movement to change the party from top to bottom. This is something that has to outlast any particular person. There is a huge job to do in renewing our party, and she has set out how she thinks we need to be thinking not just about the problems of today, but the problems of the next decade, when there's going to be a general election at the end of the 2020s, and we need to think about what are the issues and ideas that we need to debate ahead of that. Secondly, I think Kemi doesn't shift in the wind. You know what she's about and who she is. She doesn't tend to move simply because there's a pressure point. So, she set out in her launch earlier in the week some clear values that she wants to stand behind. And I think finally, in an electoral sense, I just don't think that Starmer and Farage would know what to do with her. And I think that gives us a really good chance of making this parliament interesting. We have to accept that, we need to be relevant as a party, that there is an existential risk that we become something that's not talked about in this parliament. I'm going through the division lobbies and seeing, huge numbers of Labour MPs. We've now got Reform MPs, and the Conservative Party has no right to exist. We have to make the case. And I think that Kemi can grab attention, and she has the convictions to be able to make the case to the public and make the argument that we deserve another hearing.
Yeah, lots of people, lots of members saying that, quite frankly, you betrayed their trust over recent years, and that's why I argue Labour didn't win the election. You gifted them the election, and of course the Reform were there as well. Talking of Reform, do you bump into Nigel or Lee Anderson or any of the Reform boys in Parliament?
I have to say I haven't bumped into them, but I mean, I knew Lee from when he was a Conservative MP and got on well with him. So it's a shame that he has left our party. And I think it's for us to be better than Reform, not to tell people off for voting Reform and supporting them. We lost votes and we lost people's faith, and it's for us to rebuild our party and show them something better and show them that we are the most effective opposition to a worrying Labour government.
Of course, this leadership election finishes in, 5 weeks or so. Do you think whoever's elected will be the leader come a general election if we get it in 5 years? I mean, some people are suggesting maybe you will welcome back the likes of Lee Anderson and indeed Nigel Farage to the party, and perhaps it could be a one Mr Farage who might end up leading you into the election in 5 years' time.
Look, I simply don't see that. It's rather bizarre. Nobody's asking us to embrace Ed Davey because we lost votes to the Lib Dems, or embrace Keir Starmer because we lost votes to Labour. We have to be an authentic Conservative party. We lost not because of personalities, but because we had drifted too far from people's understanding of what a centre-right Conservative party should be about. And it's for us to articulate that vision for the country, go back to our core principles and win people back, because we authentically believe it's centre-right principles that are the ones that give our country the best chance of growing and being what we all know it can be.
OK, and just finally, what's it like now being a shadow minister instead of being, in government? Labour had 14 years on the sidelines, and it's very easy for them to shout from the sidelines and accuse the Tories of doing this and that, but now the roles are reversed, and we saw it in Parliament where Keir Starmer clearly isn't used to his position because he called Rishi Sunak the Prime Minister 5 times. What's it been like for you and the party being in opposition? Because some people are really accusing you of not really being much of an opposition at the moment.
Well, look, I mean, if you are in politics, you should want to be in power. So, you know, the fact that we're not ministers anymore, it means we're not decision makers. And if you believe in what you're standing for, then you should want to be a decision maker because you're going to make the right choices for the country. We've clearly seen that Labour is already making bad choices for the country. So there is a sense of mourning for us all that we're not there, not because we care about the cars and all the rest of the paraphernalia. It's because we think that what we stand for is best for the country we love, right? But it's also, you have to get yourself into a new rhythm. And I have seen quite a lot of Labour MPs who are now ministers quite shocked at the sheer volume of work that you have to deal with, the difficult choices that you have to make. Governing is not easy. And so if I'm honest, there is a level of satisfaction at seeing them go through that process because they've spent 14 years throwing stones at us with no clear plan as to what they want to do with the country. And I think that's coming out to play now. And so we are going to be there holding them to account for those choices and making sure that we get back into government.
Yeah, and interesting that you do back Kemi because she, of course, gave that speech to Angela Rayner in the first days of their government saying, look, you're in government now, you're going to be experiencing the same stuff that you did to us. So interesting to say that.
I was in the chamber for that moment. It was a great moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Julie Lopez, you're the Shadow Minister for Culture, Media and Sport. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, more coming up here in the next hour or so, including Angela Rayner's plans for the future of Margaret Thatcher's landmark Right to Buy scheme. More of that in the next 30 minutes or so. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Wenzel.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 4:30. Your headlines. The Prime Minister has said he is deeply saddened by the death of a member of the Royal Navy after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel. The incident occurred during operations with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No other fatalities or serious injuries have been reported. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the family has been informed and a full investigation is underway. Now, the Home Office have confirmed it will not use RAF Scampton to house asylum seekers. Labour has scrapped the former Conservative government's plan to house asylum seekers at the former RAF base in Lincolnshire. Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle said the plan, which has already cost £60 million, fails to deliver value for money for the taxpayer. The Crown Prosecution Service says it's dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman, now aged in her 50s, in 1996 in London. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and report to police. A gunman shot dead by police in central Munich has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national, with German media reporting he was known to the security authorities as an Islamist extremist. Authorities are still investigating the suspect's motive, but Germany's State Interior Minister confirmed the attack was planned on the Israeli consulate in Munich. Details are still emerging. And presenter Jeremy Kyle has defended his former TV programme at an inquest into the death of Steve Diamond, who died after appearing on The Jeremy Kyle Show in 2019. The 63-year-old from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show due to his depression. Despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Big contrast today developing across the UK. Very wet in the south, drier elsewhere, and increasingly warm in the northwest. That's where the best of the sunshine will be over the next few days, with easterly winds around the northern flank of this area of low pressure over the continent. And that's the low that is causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low, the instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mists, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on a summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sunshine in the northwest, temperatures reaching the mid-20s for parts of western Scotland. Could be the warmest day of the year so far on Friday. And it's going to feel humid wherever you are, and that humidity continuing as we begin the weekend. Actually, plenty of fine weather at first on Saturday, further rain to come in the south on Sunday.
The latest GB News travel.
Hi, good afternoon to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to the M53. Firstly, southbound Hooton, that's junction 6, down towards Overpool at junction 7. There's a vehicle fire being dealt with, naturally causing queues. A lane closure has been put in place. There's surface water in the northbound M5 just after Taunton 25. That's causing queues, so extra care, of course, is advised. Elsewhere this afternoon, Hampshire, the southbound M3, still a lane closed on the exit slip. So as you come off at Farnborough, that's junction 4A, the turn off of the A327. There's a breakdown there, so a lane shut on that slip road and it's slow going. And the southbound M23 heading towards Gatwick Airport at junction 9. A 4-lane stretch there. Lane 1, the inside lane's combed off. A collision there is being recovered. Naturally, is causing delays. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. Good afternoon. Ben Leo here in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, let's talk Labour, shall we? I know you like discussing that a lot because the Deputy Prime Minister has dismissed rumours that Labour plans to end Margaret Thatcher's Right to Buy scheme. Angela Rayner now says that people have the right to buy the home they live in after she previously used the scheme herself to buy her council house in Stockport. Well, let's get the opinion of Sally Mitchell, who is a mortgage advisor and broker. Good afternoon to you, Sally. Thanks for joining me. What do you make of this? Is this the reason Keir Starmer took down Margaret Thatcher's portrait in Downing Street, do you think? Just eliminating any sense of Maggie?
Yeah, can you imagine Angela Rayner's face when this was sort of broached to her, that this is the avenue we're talking about going down, poisoned chalice or what? It's a really difficult conversation to have, actually, also debate to have, because there are so many parts to this. Yes, she is a lady who has benefited from this scheme. And I think if we go back to the basic premise that we hold dear in this country, that everybody, if they can, should be able to own their own property, then it should be the same for everyone. And Right to Buy has certainly made that dream come true for very many people. I believe the problem is that, and has been for many, many years, going way back to many different governments, that we have never replaced those buildings, those houses that have disappeared from the social housing register, which means that we are now, as they say, in a housing crisis, and very, very difficult to get those stocks replenished. I know they've said 1.5 million homes, but I haven't heard the real plan to do that yet. They're just, I suppose, looking at all sorts of avenues, but the right to buy is going to upset a lot of people if it's changed.
Well, with regards to the 1.5 million homes, they're well behind already. They should have been a bit, I can't remember the number. I think it's maybe dozens per day, but they're not at this point keeping up with it. So Right to Buy has resulted in the loss of around 24,000 homes. What would it do to the market if indeed Labour did scrap Right to Buy? Would it have any effect on pricing, for example? Would it make it easier for younger people to get onto the housing ladder?
I'm not sure. I think there needs to be some very specific plans and schemes for first-time buyers to get onto the ladder. I mean, back in the day when social housing was first put into place, it was for working people who couldn't necessarily afford to get their own property, but for working people. And it now seems that social housing is really for the most disadvantaged people in the country, in society. And I think it's shifted a bit. So they need to be looked after. They really do need to have accommodation, not temporary accommodation, not hotels or hostels, but a home that they can feel they are safe and secure in. The people I see who are looking to get onto the ladder are in a slightly different situation, and they need help with deposits, and they also need help if they're coming out of the private rented sector, because that's taking their ability, the rents that are out there, taking their ability away to actually save for a deposit. And you do need a very, very good deposit these days.
Well, talking about the private rented sector, of course, Labour mooted, and I think they will do it, they'll be hiking up capital gains tax in October to reflect income rates, so potentially up to 45% for landlords if they're selling their homes and making a profit. 45% of that going to the government. I think the top rate now is 20%. What will that do to rents? Surely landlords will just hike rents up and just pass on the cost to the tenants.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that happening with the mortgage rates going up. Private landlords cannot afford to keep their rents the same. It just doesn't make commercial sense. And interestingly, I think in 21-22, they discovered that 40% of the social housing that has been purchased under Right to Buy is actually now in private landlords' hands.
Oh, really? So what was the figure? Say that again.
40%. In 21-22. Yeah, no, that's an awful lot. So my question would be, I think Right to Buy needs to be looked at, but it doesn't seem, if 40% are going into the private sector, private rented sector, that's not the idea of Right to Buy.
Yeah,
Not
no,
really.
yeah,
It's quite
counterintuitive.
Yeah, exactly. But let's not forget, the more properties that go into the private sector, private rented sector for rent, that actually floods the market and brings the prices down. So in a way, it's quite good news for people who are looking to rent.
OK, Sally Mitchell, you're a mortgage advisor and broker. Thank you very much. Labour, of course, today said that they're not doing that. They're not scrapping Right to Buy, but it all remains to be seen, doesn't it, in the October budget. Elsewhere today, Jeremy Kyle has defended his presenting style at an inquest into the death of a guest on his old chat show. The TV presenter said it was direct, it was empathetic and it was honest. Mr Kyle gave his testimony today in the ongoing inquest into the death of 63-year-old Steve Diamond. He was found dead at his home in Portsmouth after a morphine overdose, just a week after appearing on the controversial programme hosted by Mr Kyle himself. Well, for the latest, we can speak to our national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, what's been going on at the inquest today?
So Jeremy Kyle giving his evidence on the third day of this inquest. And as you said, Ben, defending his presenting style as direct and empathetic, but also saying that the format and production of the programme was not his responsibility. And after arriving at Winchester Coroner's Court this morning, he said, I think that people who came on the show, and I think the show had been on air for 15 years, and I believe the approach for conflict resolution was always the same. It was direct, but it was empathetic, it was honest. Referring to Mr Diamond's case, the 63-year-old who is suspected to have taken his life just a week after appearing on the unaired programme, he said, I de-escalated, I calmed it down, and I put them backstage. That's what I always believed the show was about. Conflict resolution. And when they challenged him on whether or not Mr Kyle thought that the way he approached the guest constituted de-escalation, He said, I think it was frustration that he wouldn't stop lying. Now, Mr Diamond said that he tried time and time again to get onto the programme, to take a lie detector test to prove that he had not been unfaithful to his partner, Jane Callaghan. That's the footage we're showing now on your screen of him speaking to Jane Callaghan and Jeremy Kyle on the programme that was never aired. Now, he also went on to say that he was employed as the presenter and had not been involved in the selection of guests, pushing back on some suggestion that he could have been implicated in the controversial selection of Mr Diamond, who had to prove, with a note from his GP, that he wasn't taking antidepressants. He later told the inquest earlier this afternoon, the production, the producing, the aftercare, the lie detector test were not my responsibility. I was the presenter. Well, after speaking to the counsel to the inquest, he then took question from the various lawyers gathered in the coroner's court. And the lawyer representing the family, Maya Sekand, KC, read Mr Diamond's last known message to his partner, Jane Callaghan, before his death, which said, I hope the Jeremy Kyle show is so happy now about what they have done to me. She also asked for a response from Mr Kyle to Steve's assertion that the show was responsible for his death. Mr Kyle said, I say that I know there was an oil tanker of texts, messages and WhatsApp. There's not one that complains about my behaviour. Now, Maya Sekand also asked Mr Kyle if he had been belittling over his handling of Mr Diamond during the recording. He replied to that lawyer and to the court, I wouldn't agree with you. I would say it's the part from the beginning. I had a joke with him. He did get upset, but he wasn't upset from the beginning. That's the journey, and that's the way the Jeremy Kyle show was. The inquest continues.
OK, forensic, thanks, Charlie. OK, moving on. Coming up after the break, Prince William has been speaking to artists and people who have experienced homelessness about what can be done to tackle the growing problem. We'll have all the latest on the royal visit next. And should William apologise to Harry if Harry's to return to the UK? Let me know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel. Back in a tick.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
EasyJet is launching a new recruitment drive focused on attracting cabin crew members over 50 and those even considering retirement.
Well, the initiative is called Returnships and is inspired by research that suggests that 75% of people over 50 years old believe that now is the ideal time to embark on a new career.
Joining us now to discuss what it takes to embark on a second career as cabin crew is Helen Williams. Good morning, Helen.
Hi, good morning, Helen.
Welcome. Just touching down in our studio.
It is. I've had a few days off and now I'm here.
So you are now cabin crew.
I am.
What inspired you to get into it? What did you do before? How did it all come around?
Oh, so when I graduated, I took an office job with my grad scheme, and that job lasted 6 months, and I started working for a European carrier. I did just over 5 years at that European carrier and had an absolutely fabulous time. I then went on to a wet lease operation with an Irish carrier and another mainline UK carrier. I then decided to have time out. I had a business, I had a family, I had children, and last autumn I decided, why not? Let's go back and do it all again. So returning to that European carrier that I'd worked at when I was in my early 20s.
And what is that like for you now, returning that bit older, having that life experience, having your children? Do you think that's been a benefit to you?
It's absolutely been a benefit. I mean, the amount of parents that thank me for helping me with their small children when they're crying on a flight. I am that person now.
When you went back for a second time,
Yeah.
did you notice more sort of older people amongst your sort of colleagues?
I did. So when I returned onto my initial course in March of this year, just over half the course were over the age of 30.
Wow.
Which was absolutely phenomenal. And I was expecting to return and be with a lot of younger, 18, 19, 24. I was expecting to be that dinosaur. And that first day of training, to find out that I wasn't the dinosaur, you have no idea how exciting that was. And they've gone on, that particular group, to be phenomenal crew members.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Ben Leo with you in for Martin Daubney this afternoon on GB News. Prince William visited the Saatchi Gallery to visit a new exhibition aiming to tackle the complexities of homelessness, and he aims to help the public to engage with people who have experienced the problem itself. During his visit, His Royal Highness met with artists who have contributed their work to the gallery, as well as members of the public who have lived on the street. Joining me now is the former royal biographer Ian Lloyd. Good afternoon, Ian. What's been going on then with Williams today? Seems like yet another worthy cause when it comes to Williams' public service.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think there's a change in how the monarchy is undertaking engagements, and they're going more for causes rather than just, opening hospitals and cutting ribbons. The Saatchi Gallery exhibition focuses on homelessness. William launched this thing called Homewoods, which is a 5-year programme aimed at finding new solutions to homelessness. And it's been something that he's been interested in since a child, because Diana, of course, famously took him to see homeless people to show that not everybody lived in palaces. And it's been one of his aims as a working royal to see what he can do to help. And he's very active. He met this guy today, Dave Martin, who they've become friends. Dave Martin sells Big Issue. William went to join him once to do that, and they apparently exchanged Christmas cards and everything. So he's quite active with that.
Yeah, and of course, I think, was it 2009 where William actually slept on the streets for the night to kind of experience the awfulness of homelessness? Was it 2009? Can you remember?
I can't remember the date, no, but I remember him doing that. I mean, it's something, again, he's kind of keen to sort of experience, but it's all right being told that people live rough, but to actually understand it, find out for himself, I think is kind of important. And that, again, both parents, I think, encourage him to do that over the years.
OK, well, look, while William's doing this, of course, rumours are circulating off the back of that Mail on Sunday splash at the weekend, saying that Prince Harry was rumoured to be angling back for a UK return. Do you think that will happen? Is it a load of nonsense? And apparently Harry wants William to apologise even for what's happened. What do you make of all that?
It's quite odd that he apparently wants to come back, because normally he can't get out of the country fast enough. I mean, I think after the coronation he was on a bus or a coach getting back to Heathrow within about an hour or so. So I mean, his life's there, his children are there. The thing he wanted more than anything was a family, which he's got, and I can't see how it would work. I mean, he can't, like, for instance, come Monday to Friday here and then fly home every weekend across the globe, because he would get, attacked for that. And if he's here, then he's away from his children. He's got their, school days and anniversaries and birthdays and things. It just couldn't work. And then there's all the problem of where would he stay? How would it be paid? He would need staff here. Also, would the public like it? I mean, he does get a certain amount of booing when he goes to places. Not a vast amount, but certainly it's there, So would it all pan out? And then from the royal family's side, you've got the fact that they haven't resolved this situation. I mean, he was at the funeral of his uncle with William, and they didn't speak to each other. They haven't spoken since the late Queen's funeral, and he hasn't seen his father since February, when he came over to console him about having cancer. So, and then the late Queen didn't want this half in, half out very much. That's what she said. So I don't think I can't see him coming back myself.
Yeah, OK. Former royal biographer Ian Lloyd, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And news from the other day, I think it was last night, apparently Meghan Markle's lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, I think that's what it's called, suffered a bit of a setback because she was rejected a trademark patent in America for flogging her goods. We'll be back in the next couple of minutes, just after the break. More on water bosses being threatened with jail time. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Big contrast today developing across the UK. Very wet in the south, drier elsewhere, and increasingly warm in the northwest. That's where the best of the sunshine will be over the next few days, with easterly winds around the northern flank of this area of low pressure over the continent. And that's the low that is causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low, the instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mist, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on a summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sunshine in the northwest, temperatures reaching the mid-20s for parts of western Scotland. Could be the warmest day of the year so far on Friday. And it's going to feel humid wherever you are, and that humidity continuing as we begin the weekend. Actually, plenty of fine weather at first on Saturday, further rain to come in the south on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again to you. I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to the M6 northbound firstly. Now between the Kiel services and the turn-off of Stoke and Crewe, that's junction 16. Lane 1 of 3 is combed off, a collision causing delays to build. To Edgbaston in Birmingham, the Hagley Road, the inbound side of the A456. There's a fallen tree near to Stralhallen Junction there by Portland Road, so the road's blocked and it's queuing. Northbound M1 a little bit slow from Toaster 15A up to Daventry 16. There's a lane shut there for a breakdown. The Western Relief Road in Somerset, the southbound side of the A3088, that's closed from the Cartgate roundabout down toward Bunford Lane in Yeovil. There's a fallen tree. And the southbound M3, still a lane closed on the exit slip coming off of Farnborough Junction 4A. There's a breakdown there causing delays. And for now, that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
How would Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon to you. Hope you're well. It's 5 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. I'm Ben Leo, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Water company executives have been threatened with jail time if they don't meet the government's environmental targets. Is this regulation gone mad, or the only way our rivers and seas can be saved? Stateside, Donald Trump faces another court hearing today for misconduct following the results of the 2020 election. Trump has already pled not guilty to the charges against him, but what impact could this have on his re-election bid come November? And back in Westminster, we're down to 5 in the Conservative leadership election, but with another round of voting to come next week. What political games will be played in order to survive? We'll have all the latest shortly. And an investigation has been launched into the sale of Oasis's reunion tour tickets. But with new Wembley dates announced and so many fans feeling, well, quite frankly, ripped off, will the band have a new master plan to get tickets sold fairly? That's all coming in your next hour. Somebody's very pleased with themselves for that Oasis pun, but I must tell you, I'm not a fan. Anyway, I want to hear from you, gbnews.com/your say on all the stories today, including that Oasis situation. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock. Your headlines. The Prime Minister has said he is deeply saddened by the death of a member of the Royal Navy after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel. The incident occurred during operations with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No other fatalities or serious injuries have been reported. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the family has been informed and a full investigation is underway. The Home Office has confirmed it will not use RAF Scampton to house asylum seekers. Labour has scrapped the former Conservative government's plans to house asylum seekers at the former RAF base in Lincolnshire. Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle said the plan, which has already cost £60 million, fails to deliver value for money for the taxpayer. The Crown Prosecution Service says it's dropped 2 indecent assault charges against Harvey Weinstein. It was alleged the disgraced Hollywood producer had assaulted a woman now aged in her 50s in 1996 in London. However, the Special Crime Division, which continually reassesses cases, says it found no realistic chance of conviction. In a statement, the Crown Prosecution Service have reiterated their commitment to prosecuting sexual assault cases and encourage any potential victims to come forward and report to police. In other news, water bosses could face up to 2 years in jail under new laws aimed at cracking down on pollution in England's rivers, seas and lakes. The government claims the new water bill gives regulators more power to fine executives or face time behind bars if they fail to protect water quality. Environment Secretary Steve Reed says the previous government was too weak.
Instead of protecting our waterways, water companies were allowed to pay out multi-million-pound bonuses and billions in dividends, and the Conservative government was too weak to stop them. The result? This year's annual boat race here in Putney was overshadowed by health warnings telling rowers not to enter the water due to high levels of sewage. We've inherited a broken water system that affects us all, from the health and happiness of communities to the quality and resilience of our food system and the natural environment. These are systemic issues that require a proper reset with a reformed water sector.
Now, the government's admitted not all buildings with the same dangerous cladding as Grenfell Tower have been identified. That's following the damning findings published this week. The Prime Minister's pledged to review all 58 recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry with a full response due within 6 months. The report heavily criticised firms like Arconic and Kingspan, with families and survivors calling for swift punishment for those found at fault. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police are continuing to investigate potential criminal charges, which could take up to 18 months. A gunman shot dead by police in central Munich has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national, with German media reporting he was known to the security authorities as an Islamist extremist. Authorities are still investigating the suspect's motive, but Germany's State Interior Minister confirmed the attack was planned on the Israeli consulate in Munich. In France, the EU's former Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been appointed as Prime Minister. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in a bid to resolve the political gridlock after the summer's snap election. At 73, Barnier will be the oldest Prime Minister in France's modern political history, taking over from Gabriel Attal, who was the youngest. Olympic marathon runner Rebecca Cheptegei has died after being set on fire by her boyfriend. That's according to the head of Uganda's Olympic Committee. The 33-year-old, who competed just weeks ago in Paris, suffered burns to over 75% of her body in the attack. She's the third female athlete killed in the country since 2021. The Ugandan president called the attack cowardly and senseless and condemned violence against women. And Jeremy Kyle has defended his presenting style at an inquest into the death of a man who had been a guest on his chat show, saying it was direct, but it was empathetic, it was honest. 63-year-old Steve Diamond from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show due to his depression. Despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler, more in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks, Sophia. Ben Leo here, in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, water bosses have been threatened with jail time if their firms fail to meet new environmental targets. The government's new legislation will give regulators more powers to bring criminal charges against executives and enforce harsher fines for those pumping excess sewage into our rivers. Joining us now for more on this is River Action spokesperson Amy Fairman. Good afternoon, Amy. Thank you for joining me. I've said many times on this channel over 6 months, I reckon, I am sick and tired of going down to the beach with my boys trying to swim in the water, and I can't because the government, well, the water companies rather, is pumping filth into our waterways. You think the action today, Amy, and the announcement doesn't go far enough? Why?
Well, look, it's a really good first step, and it's a relief, I guess, from the industry, from the environmental sector, that we're finally seeing, some acknowledgement of the sheer scale of pollution that's, entering and poisoning our waterways. But these measures are just the tip of the iceberg. They're good first measures, but they won't actually tackle the source of the problem that we're facing with huge amounts of agricultural runoff, sewage pollution, chemicals from urban infrastructure entering our rivers, lakes, and seas up and down the country. So we need to see, a root and branch reform of the whole sector that's actually going to result in an action plan that's going to tackle this problem and tackle it fast.
Yeah, of course, it's not just raw sewage. I remember when I was a humble local newspaper reporter some 15 years ago or so, and I did stories and investigations on the insane levels of slug pellets, formaldehyde, in our waterways. What else is polluting our waters?
Yeah, well, look, 40% of our rivers are failing on the basis of agricultural pollution. So that is a massive impact, arguably more so than sewage pollution. And then we've got chemicals that are entering from road runoff. We've got antibiotics that is causing antibiotic resistance in our guts when we go and swim in the waterways, and microplastics as well. All of these issues are causing this toxic cocktail of pollutants entering our waterways, which is choking our rivers and our seas and the life within it, and making us sick as well. So we need to see the government really acknowledge the problem beyond the sewage pollution crisis when they talk about further legislation, which they have announced today that they will be looking to introduce further legislation down the line. We don't know what that looks like, but we really want to see that root and branch review to solve the systemic issue that we're facing across our waterways, not just on the sewage pollution crisis, but agricultural and urban runoff too.
Amy, I spoke to some MPs recently about this. I won't name who, but they said they were defending the Tories' record on this when they were in power, and they said that actually our rivers and waterways are a lot cleaner now than they were, say, 10 years ago, and we're not as bad as some European countries. Is that absolute guff?
Well, look, only 14% of our rivers are meeting good ecological status now. And, when the last time that we were compared to our EU counterparts, we were bottom of the pile. 30 out of 30 European neighbours of ours, and we came 30th, which is a pretty poor record. And that's mainly because we've seen, slashing of environmental legislation, environmental funding, which has meant that our enforcement agencies haven't been able to uphold the law and haven't been able to, haven't been empowered or had the funding or resources to uphold the law that actually protects our rivers, lakes and seas. So, we need to see the Environment Agency and other environmental agencies actually empowered and allowed and enabled to hold up legislation and investigate and hold polluters to account.
OK, we'll see what happens. Amy Fairman of River Action, thank you for joining me this afternoon. Now, elsewhere today, the Conservative leadership election continues to build tension within the party, and that was after Priti Patel, of course, was knocked out of the contest yesterday. Her fellow candidates paid tribute to her efforts in the aftermath of her elimination, but she still hasn't come out publicly in support of any other candidate. Well, for more on this and the other stories breaking across Westminster today, we can speak to our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. And I'm delighted to be joined as well by the senior politics editor for the New Statesman, George Eaton. Good afternoon, George. Welcome.
Hi.
Olivia, welcome back. Thank you. Olivia, we'll start with you. Kemi Badenoch, in the last hour or so, she's just received an endorsement from another shadow minister in the form of Helen Whately.
Yes.
How big's that?
Well, it is quite important for Kemi Badenoch. Helen Whately was a sort of media star in the last government. She was put up over and over again for things like Question Time. She's a pretty popular MP among the party. Kemi Badenoch is very likely to win if she gets into the final two. At the moment, according to the Conservative Home Poll, which is a very reliable poll of Conservative members, she has about double the support of Robert Jenrick, who is in second place. The question is, can she make it to that final two? Yesterday, she came second to Robert Jenrick. She was 6 votes behind. 6 votes doesn't sound like very many, but we're talking about such small numbers here that actually Robert Jenrick was very clearly the front runner. It is possible that over the next sort of week or so, Conservative MPs could move against Kemi in an aim not to get her on that final ballot paper. She isn't seen as universally popular among Conservative MPs, not so much because of her politics, but more because of her temperament. She has a bit of a history of having spats with people, being a little bit ratty in select committees or to journalists, etc. If she does make it to the final two, and at the moment I think it looks like she probably will, momentum does seem to be with her, if she's not in first place, she does seem to be holding her second place. If she does make it to the final two, she probably will win. But again, it was all still so open. None of the candidates yesterday managed to get 25% of the share of the vote. And really, there's so little in it with such small numbers of Conservative MPs.
George, I spoke to some of Priti's camp yesterday when the news broke. They said they were quite shocked and stunned and really didn't anticipate being dumped out in the first round. Now, though, where are her votes going to go? Because if Robert Jenrick, for example, gets 12 of Priti's 14 votes, he's guaranteed to make the final two.
I think Robert Jenrick is emerging as the standard bearer for the Tory right. It's really the position that Priti Patel hoped to have. I think the problem for her in the end was that she fell between two stools. She's obviously was well known as a cabinet minister as far back as the Cameron era, but she ended up being outflanked on the right by Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch without being able to win votes from the centre. They went to Tom Tugendhat and James Cleverly. So she ended up a bit politically homeless in that sense, but in a close contest, as you say, where her votes go could make a significant difference.
Do you think it's fair to say she did try appealing to those One Nation Conservatives in the party, which some members would call the wets, by, for example, that interview she had with our political editor, Christopher Hope, where he asked her if she wanted to apologise about migration levels under her stewardship as Home Secretary, and she said, well, no, No, why not? Do you think she did too much sort of trying to pander to the One Nation Tories in her party?
I don't think she did too much. I think that was a sort of honest answer, but that's exactly the problem, which is that she wasn't taking the toughest position on immigration, but nor was she really saying in the way that more Cameronite candidates would, that we really need to focus on winning back votes from Lib Dems, attracting voters in the blue. I don't think anyone is ever going to see Priti Patel as a wet Tory. Tom Tugendhat obviously has been the One Nation candidate in previous contests, so has the advantage there.
OK. Olivia, if you had to pick a final two, who would it be?
Boringly, I think it probably will be Robert Jenrick and probably Kemi Badenoch as well. I know that those are seen as the two candidates from the Tory right, and perhaps there'll be a sort of One Nation surge for Tom Tugendhat. But to be honest, most of the Conservative MPs I've spoken to would be quite happy with any of the candidates, and Tom Tugendhat doesn't look like he's about to secure some momentum. It's not like previous Conservative leadership races where it was all very kind of nasty, lots of briefing behind each other's backs. The Conservatives know this time that they are, you know, really on their uppers here, and they are sort of uniting behind the most popular candidate. So I suspect Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch might make the final two.
Olivia, as well, just breaking over the last couple of hours, Germany could adopt a Rwanda plan paid for by the UK. The Migration Commissioner over there says it could be part of wider EU move to use existing asylum facilities in the African nations. So we've ditched Rwanda. Germany have looked at it and said, yes, please, looks good for us.
Well, this was something that the previous German government was considering, and now the new German government is talking about it as well. Joachim Stamp, who's the FDP minister in charge of immigration, is looking at actually adopting the facilities that the UK paid for when they were contemplating the Rwanda scheme. The UK has already paid £318 million to Rwanda, which can't be recouped. And the German government is simply thinking of basically adopting those facilities. It's just one part of a wide proposal that might not be picked up on. If it is picked up on, it could mean that Keir Starmer comes in for quite a bit of flack. Already, unsurprisingly, Conservatives are suggesting, well, hang on, if it was good enough for Germany, why wasn't it good enough for us? The British taxpayer has already spent so much money on this. And there is also, of course, the question of whether if EU countries are adopting the policy of processing migrants in third countries as a deterrent, then will the UK become seen as a sort of soft spot for migrants coming over the Channel?
How's this going to look politically for Keir Starmer, George?
Well, I think Labour would say there's a difference between offshore processing and deportation schemes. So the last Labour government looked at processing asylum seekers offshore. It's something that the Labour in opposition was saying that they would look at. They're very aware that they need answers on immigration, both in terms of asylum, illegal migration, and also in terms of reducing legal migration, which they want to do. I think net migration is projected to fall, which will help them in terms of that argument. They're aware it's a potential vulnerability, and Labour MPs with reform in second place are particularly conscious of that issue.
Well, Tom Tugendhat, who of course is running to pick up the mantle from Rishi Sunak, he has pledged to reduce net migration to 100,000 a year. But I mean, even so, Tory members off the back of that are saying, sorry, Tom, still far too many, still far too much. Let me get your thoughts, George, on some news over the past hour. The Labour are planning, the government, to remove the remaining hereditary peers from the House of Lords. It's going to be the biggest shake-up of Parliament in a quarter of a century.
Yes, so this was something in the manifesto. Obviously, the last Labour government removed most of the hereditary peers, but you've still had 92 or so left. They're not going ahead at the moment with the retirement age of 80, but this is partial Lords reform. There are others in Labour who would like to see a fully or partly elected Lords, but Keir Starmer's team very much feel they've got a lot on their plate at the moment, and that's really something you'd do further down the line, perhaps in a second term or third term. It's often the way with governments. That's why we haven't seen the Lords properly reformed. Yeah. Everyone knows it would cause you a huge amount of grief in Parliament, a big shake-up like that, challenging the primacy of the Commons, and it's not a pressing issue for voters. But they will make the argument that no one should have the right to sit in the legislature simply by right of birth.
Olivia, 92 seats reserved for hereditary peers. Just for people who aren't sort of knee-deep in the the politics of Westminster and the structure of Parliament. Do these guys, they inherit their seats, of course. Are they entitled to the £300 a day peers get for clocking in the Lords?
I'm pretty sure that they are. I want to double check that.
So 300 quid for life. I mean, if that is true, it's 300 quid for life as long as you turn up and check in.
As long as they turn up and check in, I'm pretty sure checking with George.
George is nodding.
So it is a controversial issue. As George says, I mean, there are people who would like to see much wider reform of the House of Lords. Interesting that Keir Starmer isn't bringing in that banish all Lords over 80 policy that he was considering. I remember talking to him over the general election, and it was quite awkward at the time because obviously Joe Biden was running for the White House. And how could he be arguing that no one over 80 could sit in the Lords while supporting, a potential Joe Biden presidency? He also made Margaret Hodge and Margaret Beckett baronesses at the end of the last Parliament. They are 79 and 81. So perhaps that particular reform is going to be kicked into the long grass bit.
Yes, and some peers have commented on the plans today. One of them, a 92-year-old former leader of the Lords, Tory Lord Strathclyde, condemned the move as a, quote, high-handed, shoddy political act. So there we go. George, thank you very much. Olivia, great stuff, thank you. Coming up in the show, we'll have more on Downing Street possibly facing an inquiry following the leak of state pension data. Stick with us. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So Prince Harry, apparently, Operation Bring Harry In from the Cold. Do you feel there's any truth to this?
Lots of tongues are wagging, Nana. We heard that he was at the memorial for Lord Robert Fellows, and obviously William was there as well. And so there was lots of, everyone going into overdrive. That was in Snettisham, Norfolk the other day. He wasn't going to attend, said the People, a mouthpiece of his. I would have actually thought that maybe a lookalike had turned up. But now we have been led to believe that Harry's been talking to people from friends from his old life. And it's not that he wants to make a permanent move to the UK, so I believe. What I've heard, it's more about his reputation.
Well, he wants to have his cake and eat it, by the sounds of it. I mean, obviously, no good cake it remains uneaten.
We know that the royal family is his currency. I mean, even his late mother, obviously he's almost usurped her memory, and he needs this. He needs this to make money. Of course, he raced in to Lord Robert Fellows' memorial service. So there's lots of ambiguous behaviour, and he is going to be, in New York. We call it the silly season, don't we? And we're also looking. There's lots of different stories that are coming out, but he needs to sell stuff. He's going to be in New York, and it's. We've got to remember the enormous amount of hurt and offence. I mean, Prince William absolutely reeling. Poor Princess Catherine. Spare book coming out at the most awful time. And you've got the Netflix
series.
It's absolutely, this is a rehabilitation strategy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Hope you're well. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, covering for Martin Daubney this afternoon. Now, Downing Street could be subject to an inquiry following the leak of state pension data. Reports emerged yesterday that the full state pension will be boosted by more than £400 a year. But now the Conservatives have raised concerns with the statistics watchdog that number 10 was responsible for giving out sensitive labour market figures. But what could this leak mean for your pensions, your bank account and your wallet? Let's speak to the pension expert at financial consultancy, the Lancats, Tom McPhail. Tom, thank you for joining me. First of all, why is this leak potentially problematic and for what?
Oh, simply because there is a process that needs to be gone through with sensitive economic data that gets released according to a schedule. In this case, we're talking about earnings data, which will in turn inform the decisions around the uprating of the state pension, which will take place next April. So they use the numbers from September every year to then uprate the state pension next year. But that information hasn't been released yet. And then what we heard on Wednesday at Prime Minister's questions was the Prime Minister throwing out this number that the state pension was set to go up by £400 a year next year. And that's just under 3.5% increase. Now, that in itself is not surprising. The number isn't particularly remarkable. It's simply the fact that the government may have bypassed the normal processes for the release of this somewhat market-sensitive economic data.
But, Tom, surely this holier-than-thou Labour government, who have spent years attacking the Tories for their cronyism and their corruption and their behaviour, surely they wouldn't release this pension data to make themselves look good in the wake of ripping the winter fuel allowance from pensioners?
Well, and they've argued that this was based on internal Treasury workings, and that's not the same thing at all. Of course, I mean, the point you touch on there is, it's a lot harder to govern than it is to throw brickbats from the opposition benches, as the new government is now discovering. We will no doubt hear more of the same as we go along.
And Tom, it's the statistics watchdog who could potentially carry out the inquiry. How long would that take? What happens if number 10 is found to be guilty of leaking the data? What's the punishment?
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. I don't know.
No worries.
That aspect of this is not familiar territory to me. So
I will endeavour to find out. I'll let you know and our viewers know as well. In terms of the winter fuel allowance, Tom, how will that affect pensioners this year? Because I've heard of some pensioners who are just above the threshold of pension credit, maybe £13,000 a year, and now they're saying, I am literally, it's a cliche, but I am literally going to be choosing between heating and eating this winter.
Well, and this is where the government's use of that increase to the state pension was a bit of a sleight of hand, because, of course, the increase to the state pension, this around £400 a year that will get added onto the state pension next year, that's a cost of living increase. That's baked in. That happens every year using this triple lock mechanism of inflation or earnings of 2.5%. And now they're saying, well, look, you're going to get that money, so that kind of offsets the fact that you're not getting the winter fuel allowance. But they're two entirely different things. One is a cost of living increase. The other is a top-up to help low-earning households, low-income pensioners, to meet the cost of heating their home through the winter. And if you're just above the pension credit allowance, so you're not getting the welfare top-up to your retirement income, then you're now going to be ineligible for that winter fuel allowance. It's going to affect millions of households, and you don't need to be rich to still fall into this trap. So there are a lot of low-earning pensioners who won't get the pension credit, now won't get the winter fuel allowance, but who are still going to struggle with this through the winter.
Yeah, it's a sorry situation. Tom McPhail from the Lancats, thank you for joining me. Appreciate your expertise. And it's not just pensioners struggling in the UK, because millions of people across the country are at breaking point as shockingly low levels of income leave them hungry, without the basics, and indeed fearing debt collectors. That's all according to the debt advice charity Christians Against Poverty, who have released a report today showing 11.8 million, and I can't believe that figure. 11.8 million people in the UK don't have enough money to live on. Anna Riley has the story.
Christians Against Poverty debt advisors like Helen Bolton provide free financial support in churches across the nation. The charity's latest report warns that chronically low incomes are devastating the lives of millions in the UK. This is due to a deficit budget where people's earnings aren't enough to cover the essentials.
We're really surprised to find out that 22% of the population are in this situation, and that equates in the UK to 14.4 million people that are inevitably living in poverty because they've not got enough money coming in to pay their essential bills. The overall headline inflation is coming down, but inflation on the basics of life is not coming down, or is coming down very, very slowly. Meanwhile, incomes, whether that's salaries, wages, or benefits, have not gone up anywhere near in line with inflation, and so inevitably things are squeezed.
Michelle Neal was helped by the charity after falling into £30,000 of debt. Her home was repossessed and she relied on food banks as her carer's wage didn't cover her bills.
There weren't any food in house. It was just one nightmare after another, and we had to start... Well, basically what we had to do is we had to go back and live with Mum for a while. And bearing in mind Mum had dementia, which weren't good, but fortunately council came through because we were classed as homeless. Council came through and we got... It weren't greatest of properties, but it were a roof over his head. Not easy when you're on your own, paying bills and things like that, especially if it's going to go up.
With the energy price increase next month, Christians Against Poverty want the government to take action now.
We will have people who are cold, who are sitting in the dark, who have... The mental health is going down the pan. One of the things that we're campaigning for is for the government to look at like a minimum income standard, whether that is through benefits or whether that is through legislation about minimum wages or minimum hours that people are contracted for. I guess just to accept that there's not a lot more can be done about expenditure, and so we've got to look at giving a minimum level of income to all families.
Christians Against Poverty are calling for the public to support their campaign, and they hope the Labour Party will listen. Anna Riley, GB News.
Very important report there from Anna Riley. Thank you, Anna. Now, lots more to come between now and 6 o'clock, including how Donald Trump's latest court case could impact his presidential bid come November. Now it's time for your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Ben, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 5:30. Your headlines. The Prime Minister has said he is deeply saddened by the death of a member of the Royal Navy after a Merlin helicopter ditched in the English Channel. The incident occurred during operations with HMS Queen Elizabeth. No other fatalities or serious injuries have been reported. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed the family has been informed and a full investigation is now underway. The Home Office has confirmed it will not use RAF Scampton to house asylum seekers. Labour has scrapped the former Conservative government's plans to house asylum seekers at the former RAF base in Lincolnshire. Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle said the plan, which has already cost £60 million, fails to deliver value for money for the taxpayer. In France, the EU's former Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, has been appointed as Prime Minister. President Emmanuel Macron made the announcement in a bid to resolve the political gridlock after the summer's snap election. At 73, Barnier will be the oldest Prime Minister in France's modern political history, taking over from Gabriel Attal, who was the youngest. A gunman shot dead by police in central Munich has been identified as an 18-year-old Austrian national, with German media reporting he was known to the security authorities as an Islamist extremist. Authorities are still investigating the suspect's motive, but Germany's State Interior Minister confirmed the attack was planned on the Israeli consulate in Munich. And Jeremy Kyle has defended his presenting style at an inquest into the death of a man who had been a guest on his chat show, saying it was direct, but it was empathetic and honest. 63-year-old Steve Diamond from Portsmouth reportedly took his own life just a week after failing a lie detector test on the programme, which accused him of cheating on his partner. The inquest has revealed that Diamond had a history of mental health issues, including multiple suicide attempts, and had been rejected initially by the show due to his depression. Despite the findings, he was later allowed to appear after providing a GP's letter. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Wensler. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3166 and €1.1863. The price of gold is £1,905.90 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed the day at 8,241 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello, welcome back. Thanks, Sophia. I had a very good comment from Mel on gbnews.com/your say, which I've lost. I refreshed the page. However, Adrian, you said something similar, but not quite as emphatic. You said you couldn't make it up. Germany will send asylum seekers to Rwanda using the facilities we've paid for. If this happens, Keir Starmer needs to stand down. Mel, thank you for your previous comment, which I lost. I'll try and retrieve it before the show's out. Up at 6 o'clock is Michelle Dewberry. Michelle, what's in store for our lovely viewers this evening?
Hello there. Well, of course, I want to look at this question about whether or not water bosses should potentially face prison for some of their antics when it comes to the absolute state of the water in this country. I also want to ask, at the moment, when a child is convicted of a crime, the automatic assumption, the starting point, if you like, is mostly the fact of anonymity. Should that be the case, or is it time to rethink that now, given the way that some kids in our country seem insistent on behaving? I also want to look at Scampton, of course, RAF, former base there. People will know that now, after so many months of protesters saying no, save our Scampton, the government seems to have listened. Thousands of asylum seekers will not be going into that site after all, so I want to look at that. VAT on private school fees, so much to talk about tonight.
Cracking show coming up. Stay tuned for that at 6 o'clock. In the meantime, Mel, I found your comment. Germany are looking at sending their asylum seekers to facilities we've paid for to be processed. These are the same facilities and the same scheme our glorious leader says was just a Tory gimmick and should be scrapped. Let's hope Germany go ahead and make it work. It will show what an absolute shower this lot are. Your thoughts, not mine. More to come in the next couple of minutes, but for now, let's go to a break. I'm Ben Leo on GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Big contrast today, developing across the UK. Very wet in the south, drier elsewhere, and increasingly warm in the northwest. That's where the best of the sunshine will be over the next few days, with easterly winds around the northern flank of this area of low pressure over the continent. And that's the low that is causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low, the instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mists, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on a summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sunshine in the northwest, temperatures reaching the mid-20s for parts of western Scotland. Could be the warmest day of the year so far on Friday. And it's going to feel humid wherever you are, and that humidity continuing as we begin the weekend. Actually, plenty of fine weather at first on Saturday, further rain to come in the south on Sunday.
The latest GB News travel. Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems on the M6 on two stretches. First of all, long queues heading north through Staffordshire. The inside lane of 3 closed off northbound from the Kill services to junction 16, the Stoke-on-Trent turn off following an accident involving a caravan. And further down on the northbound carriageway, 2 lanes are blocked off at junction 6, Spaghetti Junction, of course, the Birmingham exit at the scene of an obstruction of some kind. On the M40 heading north through Buckinghamshire, long queues, 2 to 3 heading away from Beaconsfield towards Loudwater after an earlier collision. And on the Essex stretch of the M25, there are clockwise queues just after the A12. There was debris on the carriageway. All lanes are back open. And on the M5 in Devon, 2 lanes are closed northbound from junction 29 to 28, north of Exeter, following a collision. Non-queues back along the A38. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Ben Leo in for Martin Daubney this afternoon, only on GB News. Let's head stateside now, where Donald Trump's hearing into his conduct following the 2020 election has begun today in Washington, D.C. The former president faces 4 charges relating to his behaviour after falsely claiming the most recent presidential election was rigged. Joining me now for more on this is the Democratic strategist and former spokesperson for Barack Obama, no less, Federico De Jesus. Federico, thank you for joining me. What's going on in D.C. today? Trump, of course, has pled not guilty. If he is found guilty and he's sentenced to something, that won't happen until after the election. So how pivotal is this case?
Thank you. It is pivotal because this is the first time in history where there was not a peaceful transfer of power in the more than 200 plus years of the American Republic, 250. So it is also pivotal because the Supreme Court made what many consider controversial, some disastrous decision awarding partial immunity for official acts for presidents and former presidents. And so Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, had to revise the superseding indictment that he filed to make sure that he did not run afoul of that decision and that there is accountability for what was in essence a coup attempt that we all saw that was bloody. On January 6th, people died, and where they assaulted the Capitol to interrupt the count of the Electoral College. So this is very serious. Unfortunately, we won't have a verdict before the election, but at least we will have at least the presentation of some evidence and oral arguments so the American people can see how an ex-president tried to manipulate the results and steal an election. This is very serious.
I mean, he would deny that, of course. So one of the charges was that Trump asked Mike Pence, his then vice president, to pause the counting of electoral college votes. Is that akin to trying to steal an election?
Well, let's not, let's refer to the record. Trump this week said that he had every right to interfere in the election. He would argue that he was trying to protect the election, but we all saw that recording, and these are separate charges in Georgia, where he told the Secretary of State of Georgia to please find him the 11,700 votes that were missing, meaning steal the election for me. There's a fake electors plot. We know there were several meetings leading up to January 6th. This was not a spontaneous protest. This was a violent coup attempt. And so there's plenty of evidence. The January 6th Commission in Congress investigated and did a lengthy report with several administration and White House officials admitting that that was what was going on. And Trump himself incited the violence, and that's part of the charges. And to say that these were official acts to subvert the Constitution in that way is very twisted legally. But there is a supermajority of conservative justices in the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's obviously a complication that Trump feels would be in his favor. And his motions to delay and delay and delay have played in his favor so that people won't have the verdict before the election.
OK, can I ask you just about the election race for the White House? Camilla Harris has given one interview to CNN where critics argue she bombed and it was a train wreck. Donald Trump, meanwhile, he's giving interviews to anybody and everybody. Elon Musk, Lex Friedman, the popular social media star, Theo Von as well. Does it feel like Kamala Harris is kind of hiding away from this fight a little bit?
I don't think that the Dana Bash interview on CNN was a bomb. I think that there were some areas she could have done better. She did get her message across. Frankly, it was a little weird to have Tim Walz there. But yeah, she should definitely do a lot more interviews. I think that she was riding high in momentum, and she's definitely up in a lot of polls. But the race is still very close. And she needs to reach a lot of different audiences, not just national cable TV, but also podcasts, radio stations in the key swing states. And I hope, as a Democratic strategist, that she does that. She has the opportunity in the next 2 months to close the deal, but she needs to reach people where they are. And that involves being accountable to the media. So absolutely, she should do more of that.
Look, we're talking about elections not being accepted and being contested. If Donald Trump wins in November, will America unite, or will we see some pretty unsavory scenes, do you think?
I'm afraid that there will be political violence no matter the result of the election. If the Democrats win, I don't think that Donald Trump will accept the results. And I fear, and I hope there isn't, that there's more political violence. And if Donald Trump wins, he's promised to persecute his political opponents and jail them, and to use the force of the state against his political opponents. So that doesn't bode well for.
Well, that sounds
peace.
like what Joe Biden's been doing, Federico, with respect. that's exactly
Really?
what Joe Biden's been doing.
What evidence do you have of that?
Well, if there's the raid on Mar-a-Lago for documents, which Joe Biden himself was guilty of the same crime.
The president can steal classified documents. Is that what you're saying to your audience?
Well, Joe Biden did it. He was only let off.
Who did it.
He was only let off a conviction, Federico, because the judge said that he came across as an elderly man with poor memory. So Biden would have been convicted of the exact same thing.
Using the state to enforce the law. A former president does not have rights to steal classified documents.
Yeah, likewise Joe Biden. But the argument is, Federico, I've heard that before about people saying Trump will do this and that when he's in power. Why wouldn't he have done it in the first 4 years he was in power, from 16?
Well, I think that he's emboldened. I think that he has a Supreme Court decision that says that he's immune for certain things. And he said, and according to Project 2025, that he wants to erase the independence of the Justice Department and go after his political opponents. These are his words. Everybody can look them up, and there's evidence, plenty of that. Yeah. And again, we have January 6th. He did do this. This isn't conjecture. People died.
Yeah, I mean, the people that died on January 6th were a MAGA supporter who was shot by Nancy Pelosi's bodyguard and a police officer who died of natural causes. Okay. But Federico, yeah, I have. Thank you. Federico, appreciate you being with me. Thank you very much. Former spokesperson for Barack Obama. OK, we move on. Coming up, back over this side of the pond, Oasis. They've announced more shows for next summer, but will it be the same battle to grab a ticket and as expensive? Some tickets, of course, going for £4,000, £5,000, £6,000. I'm Ben Leo on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets and My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
A window cleaner is battling to prove he has the only portrait of William Shakespeare made in his lifetime.
Yes, so owner Stephen Wadlow has been trying to validate the painting for years. He's had it x-rayed, he's had it analysed by experts, he's had it scientifically dated back to 1595 when the playwright was 31 years old. If it is the Bard, it could be worth north of £200 million.
Steve, welcome to GB News. First of all, just explain how you came to have this painting in your possession.
It was sat there all my lifetime, sort of thing, while I was growing up, above the television in the corner. It was only back about 12 years ago that a visitor, she said, "Oh, I think it looks like William Shakespeare, you know, I like your copy of William Shakespeare," and was shocked to see it was an original painting. So it was only then that I started researching, and the different institutions have helped with the x-rays and all the rest of it. But then, is it actually Shakespeare? Well, all the facial comparisons, technology, everything like that, all matches with the Droeshout, which is the only known 2D image of Shakespeare. And who do you go to find that out?
There's a suggestion in the Sun's write-up of this story that you've been struggling to be heard in the academic world, the lofty art world. It's all a bit snooty. Yes. It's about who you know, and you're a tradesman.
Yes, yes. That is definitely true in some avenues, but then I have to say, and it's lovely to be able to have this opportunity to say it, there's other people in that world that have been fabulous. It's taken a long time to sort of get listened to. We want the discussion out there because all the evidence that we've got indicates that this really should be discussed.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back. Good afternoon to you. Ben Leo with you in for Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Oasis have once again shocked the music world by adding 2 more dates to their 2025 reunion tour. Have you got yours? But their ticket launch is now the subject of an investigation by the UK's competition watchdog, with the focus on how dynamic pricing affected the cost. Some fans on Ticketmaster saw some tickets dramatically double and even triple in price. Well, let's get the thoughts of music producer Nick Stewart on the latest. Good evening, Nick. Good afternoon. First of all, good news that Oasis have added 2 new dates. How are they going to make this fairer compared to the initial launch of tickets?
With some difficulty, Ben. Good evening. I think the thing to say, let's go back just a little bit here. Over the weekend, 10 million fans from 158 countries, queued up to buy tickets for the tour. In addition to the 2 they already had booked at Wembley, they've now added 2 more. And in order to satisfy demand at Wembley, they'd have to put on 111 gigs. I mean, the demand for this tour is completely unprecedented. And Oasis have put a statement out saying, well, prior meetings between promoters, Ticketmaster and the band's management resulted in a positive ticket sales strategy, which would be a fair experience for fans, including, and this is important, dynamic ticketing to help keep general ticket prices down as well as reduce touting. The execution of the plan failed to meet expectations. That was what the band said. And I've got a bit of sympathy here. You would say that, of course I would, being in the industry, but I've got some sympathy here because nothing like this has been seen before. I spoke to a senior person in the live business an hour ago to talk about this, and he said he'd never seen anything like it. And so, you know, the CMA are now coming on board. They're going to talk to Ticketmaster to see whether these tickets have breached consumer protection law. Can I confirm or otherwise that they have? No, I can't.
But Nick, Oasis are still using Ticketmaster for these 2 new dates. Why are they doing that? Because you would have thought after the debacle...
Well, Ben, the answer is that Ticketmaster are one of the several. I mean, there are other ticketing sites, including, you know, Gigs and Tours and See Tickets. There's only I know where you're heading with this, which is a monopolistic structure between Live Nation, Ticketmaster, and all the rest of it. But there is only a certain amount of mechanic that can be, you know, put into place to deal with this. I don't think, I mean, dumping Ticketmaster is not going to solve the problem.
Nick, we've got 30 seconds left, but some of our viewers say that Oasis aren't all that anyway. You've got, you know, they're a Beatles rip-off, there's much better bands, and they don't understand the fuss. What's your response to those kind of people? Very briefly.
Well, my response to that is everyone's entitled to their view. Back in the day, people preferred Blur and Pulp to Oasis. But the fact of the matter is, this is the most. I was with Apple Music today. They told me that Oasis's streaming numbers on Apple are off the chart. This is one of the most popular bands in the history of recorded music.
Very, very pushed for time, so sorry to cut you short. Nick, thank you very much. Appreciate you being with us. That's all from me for today. Jubes & Co will keep you company for the next hour or so. I'm back tomorrow night for Patrick Christie's show at 9 p.m. Time now for your weather with Aidan.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Big contrast today developing across the UK. Very wet in the south, drier elsewhere, and increasingly warm in the northwest. That's where the best of the sunshine will be over the next few days, with easterly winds around the northern flank of this area of low pressure over the continent. And that's the low that is causing a lot of wet weather for South Wales, the south and southwest of England. The rain increasingly heavy as we end the day. Very miserable conditions there for the south and southwest, but it does tend to ease a little overnight. We keep the cloud and certainly a lot of low cloud in the south and the east, but in the northwest, as well as for Northern Ireland, northwest England, well, it's going to be clear as we begin Friday, but it is a warm start to the day wherever you are. We've got humid air arriving from the continent, but around the top of that low pressure system via the North Sea. All that humidity and closest to the low, the instability causing a lot of showers first thing in the south and southwest once again, but drier elsewhere. Some low clouds, mists, har and fret into eastern Scotland as well as northeast England, but western Scotland, Northern Ireland faring best for long spells of sunshine. Likewise for Cumbria, Lancashire and North Wales. Beautiful weather here, having mostly missed out on a summer in the northwest of the UK. Well, the next few days look absolutely glorious. The same can't be said for the south and especially the southwest, where the rain will be on and off through Friday, but it will be heavy at times. And that rain accumulating 50, 100 and in some spots more than 100 millimetres. So rain warning force, risk of localised flooding. But where we do have the sunshine in the northwest, temperatures reaching the mid-20s for parts of western Scotland. Could be the warmest day of the year so far on Friday. And it's going to feel humid wherever you are, and that humidity continuing as we begin the weekend. Actually, plenty of fine weather at first on Saturday, further rain to come in the south on Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays continue heading north up the M6 through Staffordshire to junction 16, the Stoke-on-Trent turnoff after a collision involving a caravan. All restrictions have now been lifted, still taking about half an hour in the queues back past the Keele services. In South London, the A204 Tulse closed at Tulse, just off the South Circular. Emergency services are dealing with an incident there. And the M48 remains closed from England into Wales over the Severn Bridge for an ongoing police investigation. Long queues on the M4 over the Prince of Wales Bridge into Wales towards Newport as you've been diverting tonight. Onto public transport, there are severe delays on the Elizabeth line through London, Whitechapel to Shenfield in East London after a trespass incident at Brentwood, and Eurotunnel reporting a waiting time of an hour at Folkestone. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special